The gunshot echoed across the marble terrace like a crack in the world itself. Clara Whitmore didn't flinch. Blood spread across expensive fabric. Someone's, maybe hers, she couldn't tell yet, and Victor Hale's smile never wavered even as the constables closed in. "You think this ends anything?" he whispered, close enough that she smelled gunpowder and cologne. Behind her, Adrian Blackthorne was shouting something, his voice raw with an emotion she'd never heard from him before. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. None of it was. But here's the thing about women who refuse to bow. They don't get neat endings. They get messy, bloody, complicated ones that start long before anyone realizes the fight's begun. This is that story. The one where standing up costs everything, where power and justice collide, where a man who owned half the frontier meets a woman who refuses to be owned by anyone, and where the worst monsters wear the best suits. Stay with me. Watch how far this goes. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this truth travels. Because it starts 3 months earlier in a ballroom full of liars, with one woman stupid enough or brave enough to tell the truth. The Whitmore estate had seen better years, though you wouldn't know it from the chandeliers. Clara's mother, Beatrice, had a gift for making decay look dignified. Fresh flowers positioned to hide water stains, strategic lighting that concealed cracks in the plaster, servants trained to move with enough grace that guests wouldn't notice there were half as many as there should be. Tonight's ball was the masterpiece of that illusion. 300 guests, most of them rich enough to buy the Whitmore house twice over, none of them aware they were dancing on a foundation that might collapse by spring. Clara stood near the punch table, watching her mother work the room with the precision of a general deploying troops. Every smile calculated, every laugh timed. Beatrice Whitmore had built a career out of making powerful people feel seen, and tonight she was pulling every favor, calling every debt, orchestrating every conversation toward one specific end. Finding Clara a husband before the creditors came calling. "You're doing it again." Clara turned. Her younger sister Margaret, Maggie to everyone who mattered, appeared at her elbow holding 2 glasses of champagne. She offered one to Clara with a look that mixed sympathy and exasperation in equal measure. "Doing what?" "The face. The one that makes you look like you're watching an execution instead of a party." Maggie took a sip, surveying the crowd with the easy confidence of someone who didn't yet understand how bad things were. At 19, she still believed charm and beauty could solve most problems. At 26, Clara knew better. "Maybe I am watching an execution," Clara said. "Just a slow one. Death by 1,000 insufferable conversations about crop yields and railroad investments. You could try enjoying yourself, or at least pretending to. Mother's going to have an apoplexy if you keep scowling at every eligible bachelor like he personally wronged you. The eligible bachelors are boring. They're rich, also boring." Maggie laughed, the sound bright enough to turn heads. She had their mother's gift for performance, the ability to make everything seem lighter than it was. "You know what your problem is? You actually care about things, ideas, principles. It's terribly inconvenient for someone in your position." "My position being woman on the verge of financial ruin?" "Your position being the eldest daughter of a family that needs you to marry well before father's debts eat us alive." Maggie's smile didn't falter, but something harder entered her eyes. "I know you think I don't understand, that I'm just playing dress-up while Rome burns. But I understand perfectly, Clara. I'm just choosing to enjoy the music before the city falls." Clara softened. Maggie was right. She did underestimate her sister sometimes. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to be." "Righteously insufferable? Yes, you do. It's part of your charm." Maggie squeezed her arm. "Just try not to alienate anyone too important tonight. Mother's already nervous." She drifted away before Clara could respond, drawn into a cluster of young people near the orchestra. Clara watched her go, feeling suddenly older than 26, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. The truth was, Maggie had it backwards. Clara didn't care too much about principles. She cared too little about the right things. She was supposed to care about security, reputation, making a good match. Instead, she lay awake at night thinking about the families being pushed off their land by new agricultural reforms, about workers crushed in factory accidents while owners built bigger houses, about a system that ground people down and called it progress. Useless thoughts, dangerous thoughts, the kind that didn't catch husbands or save estates. "Miss Whitmore." Clara turned, composing her face into something approaching pleasant. The man who'd appeared at her side was tall, well-dressed, with the kind of grooming that suggested a skilled valet and unlimited time. She didn't recognize him immediately. There were too many guests tonight, too many faces blurring together. "Forgive me," she said. "I don't believe we've been introduced." "We haven't." He smiled, and something about it set her teeth on edge. Too practiced, too smooth. "I'm Victor Hale. Recently arrived from the Southern Territories. Your mother was kind enough to include me in tonight's festivities." "Of course." Victor Hale. She'd heard the name, though not much about the man himself. "New money," someone had said. "Made a fortune in land speculation. Young, unmarried, and hunting for a wife to establish his social credentials. In other words, exactly the kind of man her mother would throw at her." "Mr. Hale," she said, offering her hand. His grip was firm, lingering a half-second too long. "Welcome to our home. I hope you're enjoying yourself." "Immensely. Though I confess I was hoping to secure a dance with the evening's most intriguing guest." "I'm afraid my dance card is rather full." "I'm not talking about your sister." His smile widened. "I've heard interesting things about you, Miss Whitmore. They say you have opinions, actual thoughts rattling around in that lovely head. It's refreshingly rare." Clara wasn't sure if she'd been complimented or insulted, possibly both. "People exaggerate." "Do they? I was told you once corrected the mayor on his interpretation of property law at a dinner party." "He was wrong. See? Opinions." Hale offered his arm. "One dance. I promise to bore you with nothing more offensive than my thoughts on the weather." She hesitated. Her mother was watching from across the room, hope written clearly on her face. Refusing would be rude. Worse, it would be strategic suicide. Hale was exactly the kind of prospect Beatrice was desperate to cultivate. "One dance," Clara agreed, taking his arm. Clara tas. He led her onto the floor as a waltz began. He was a good dancer, she'd give him that. Confident without being showy, guiding without forcing. They moved through the first turn in silence, and Clara found herself studying him. There was something calculated about Victor Hale, the way he smiled, the way he positioned himself in crowds. Like everything was a chess move. "You're not enjoying this," he observed. "I barely know you. How would you know what I'm enjoying? Because you look like you're solving a complicated equation in your head. Most women I dance with at least pretend I'm interesting. Most women are better actors than I am." He laughed, and it sounded genuine enough that Clara felt herself relax fractionally. Honest to a fault. "I like that." "It's not a fault." "In your world?" "It absolutely is." He spun her smoothly through a turn. "Tell me, Miss Whitmore, do you always say exactly what you think, or do you save it for special occasions?" "I've learned when to hold my tongue." "But you don't like it." "Does anyone like pretending to be something they're not?" "Most people do it so naturally they forget they're pretending at all." His eyes, she noticed, were very dark, almost black. "You're not like them, though, are you? You still remember the difference between the mask and the face." It was an oddly perceptive thing to say, and Clara wasn't sure how to respond. She was saved by the music ending, by the need to curtsy and step apart. "Thank you for the dance, Mr. Hale." "Victor, please. Mr. Hale makes me sound like my father, and that's a comparison neither of us wants." He bowed, still holding her gaze. "I hope we can continue this conversation. Perhaps at dinner? I'd love to hear your thoughts on those agricultural reforms everyone's pretending aren't happening." Before she could answer, he was gone, slipping back into the crowd with the ease of someone used to making entrances and exits on his own terms. Clara stood there, unsettled. Victor Hale was charming, too charming, the kind of charming that felt rehearsed, and yet there had been something genuine in that last comment, a recognition that they both saw through the same social facade. Dangerous. Men like that were dangerous. Not because they were bad, necessarily, but because they made you want to trust them. "There you are." Clara turned to find her father, Edmund Whitmore, approaching with the careful steps of a man who'd already had too much brandy. He was only 52, but looked older, worn down by worry and poor decisions. Once he'd been vigorous, commanding. Now he mostly commanded the attention of his creditors. "Father, you should be socializing." "I've socialized enough, smiled at enough vultures pretending to be friends." He took her arm, steering her toward the terrace doors. "Walk with me. I need air." They stepped outside into the cool night. The terrace overlooked the gardens, though most were overgrown now. Another economy, another thing they couldn't afford to maintain properly. The sound of the ball faded to a distant murmur. "I'm sorry," Edmund said abruptly. "For what?" "All of this. The debts. The pressure on you and your sister. I made bad investments, trusted the wrong people, and now you're paying the price." Clara felt something tighten in her chest. She'd been angry at her father for years, angry at his weakness, his poor judgment, his inability to protect them. But standing here, watching him struggle to meet her eyes, she felt only a tired kind of sadness. "We'll manage," she said. "Will we? Your mother thinks a good marriage will solve everything. Maybe she's right." That Hale fellow seemed interested. "He's a stranger. He's rich, and from what I hear, he's looking to establish himself in proper society. A union with our family would give him legitimacy. In exchange, we get security." "You're talking about me like I'm a commodity. I'm talking about survival." Edmund's voice cracked slightly. "I know what I'm asking, Clara. I know it's not fair. But if you don't marry well and soon, the estate gets sold. We lose everything. Maggie's prospects disappear. Yes, Father, I understand the stakes." They stood in silence. From inside came laughter, music, the sounds of people enjoying themselves. People who didn't lie awake calculating how many months until the bank foreclosed. "There's going to be a gathering next week," Edmund said finally, "at the Blackthorn Manor. Duke Adrian Blackthorn is hosting a discussion about the new land reforms. He's invited several families, including ours. Your mother thinks it would be good for you to attend. Make connections." "Duke Blackthorn." Clara kept her voice neutral, though the name alone made her jaw tighten. Adrian Blackthorn was everything wrong with the frontier elite crystallized into one insufferably powerful man. Wealthy beyond measure, politically connected, utterly convinced of his own righteousness. He'd been one of the primary architects of the land reforms, policies that were systematically destroying small farmers and concentrating power among the already powerful. "I know you don't like him," Edmund said. "I don't know him well enough to dislike him personally. I dislike what he represents." "Then go and tell him that. Maybe he'll respect your honesty. Stranger things have happened." Clara doubted it. Men like Blackthorn didn't respect honesty. They tolerated it when it came from other powerful men and ignored it entirely when it came from women. But her father was looking at her with something close to hope, and she didn't have the heart to crush it. "I'll think about it," she said. The gathering at Blackthorn Manor turned out to be exactly as insufferable as Clara had anticipated. The manor itself was obscene. 3 stories of imported marble and dark wood, furnished with the kind of excess that suggested money was so abundant it had become meaningless. Everything gleamed. Everything was perfect. Clara had grown up in wealth, but this was different. This was wealth that didn't even try to hide itself, that announced its presence in every chandelier and painting and carefully manicured garden. The discussion was held in a reception hall that could have housed her entire estate. 20 guests, all carefully selected from the frontier's most influential families. Politicians, landowners, industrialists, people who shaped policy over brandy and handshakes. Clara sat between her mother and a railroad magnate who hadn't stopped talking about expansion routes since they'd arrived. She smiled, nodded, pretended to care, all while watching Duke Adrian Blackthorn hold court at the front of the room. He was younger than she'd expected, 30, maybe 32, tall, dark-haired, with the kind of aristocratic features that painters loved, and the bearing of someone who'd never questioned their right to command a room. He spoke with absolute confidence, laying out the benefits of the new land reforms with the precision of a man who'd never personally worried about where his next meal would come from. "These policies create efficiency," he was saying. "By consolidating smaller, unproductive farms into larger operations, we increase output, improve infrastructure, and strengthen the economic foundation of the entire territory. Yes, there's short-term disruption, but the long-term benefits far outweigh the temporary inconvenience to those being displaced." Temporary inconvenience. Clara's fingers tightened on her glass. "What about the families?" someone asked. "The ones losing their land? Compensation is provided. We're not throwing people into the street. They receive fair market value and assistance relocating to urban areas where, frankly, they'll have better opportunities. Agricultural work is dying. We're helping these people transition to a modern economy." "Fair market value determined by whom?" Clara heard herself ask. The room went quiet. Heads turned. Her mother's hand found her knee under the table, squeezing in warning. Blackthorn's gaze settled on her, cool and assessing. I'm sorry, I don't believe we've been introduced. Clara Whitmore. She kept her voice level, polite. I'm curious about the compensation structure. Who decides what constitutes fair market value for land that's often been in families for generations? Independent assessors. The process is transparent and regulated. Regulated by whom? The same government officials who benefit from consolidation? The same banks that finance the acquisitions? Miss Whitmore. Her mother's voice was strained. Perhaps this isn't the appropriate forum. I think it's an excellent question, Blackthorn interrupted. His expression hadn't changed, but something had shifted in his eyes. Interest, maybe. Or annoyance. The regulatory framework was established by the territorial legislature with input from economic experts and legal scholars. If you have concerns about its integrity, I'm happy to provide you with documentation. I've read the documentation, Your Grace. What concerns me is the gap between policy and practice. On paper, the system looks fair. In reality, families are being offered a fraction of what their land is worth, with no meaningful recourse when they dispute the assessments. You seem very well informed about the implementation details. I pay attention. Clearly. He leaned back slightly, studying her like she was an equation he was trying to solve. And what would you suggest as an alternative? We can't halt progress because some people are resistant to change. I'm not suggesting we halt progress. I'm suggesting we define progress as something other than efficiency at any cost. Maybe we consider what happens to communities when you rip apart their foundations. Maybe we acknowledge that some things, stability, generational continuity, human dignity, have value that doesn't show up in your economic projections. Someone coughed. The railroad magnate looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Beatrice had gone completely pale. Blackthorn, though, smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who'd just spotted interesting prey. You're suggesting we prioritize sentiment over economics. I'm suggesting economics that doesn't treat people as collateral damage might actually be more sustainable in the long run. Fascinating. Tell me, Miss Whitmore, what's your background in economic policy? I don't have one. Land management? None. So your expertise comes from basic human empathy. I realize that's in short supply in rooms like this. The silence that followed was absolute. Clara could hear her mother's breathing, sharp and shallow, could feel every eye in the room on her. She'd gone too far. She knew it. But something in Blackthorn's assured condescension had snapped the leash she usually kept on her tongue. Miss Whitmore, Blackthorn said quietly, I appreciate passion, but policy requires more than empathy. It requires understanding complex systems, balancing competing interests, making difficult decisions that benefit the greater good, even when they cause individual hardship. These are not simple problems with simple solutions. I never said they were simple. I said they were being solved badly. And you could do better? I could try to do better. There's a difference. He studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a short, sharp sound. Well, this has been more interesting than I anticipated. I appreciate your candor, Miss Whitmore, even if I disagree with virtually everything you've said. It's rare to encounter someone willing to speak their mind so thoroughly. It was a dismissal, politely phrased but absolute. The conversation moved on. Other guests rushed to fill the silence with safer topics. Clara sat back, her heart hammering, very aware that she'd just committed social suicide in front of half the territory's most powerful families. Her mother didn't speak to her for the rest of the evening. The carriage ride home was excruciating. Beatrice stared out the window, her jaw tight, while Edmund occupied himself with his flask. Maggie tried to break the tension with cheerful observations about the manor's decor, but even she eventually gave up, lapsing into uncomfortable silence. It wasn't until they were home, until Clara was heading for her room, that Beatrice finally spoke. My study, now. Clara followed her mother into the small office where Beatrice managed the household accounts, or tried to, given how little there was to manage. The older woman closed the door with careful precision and turned, her composure finally cracking. What were you thinking? I was answering a question about policy. You were challenging Duke Adrian Blackthorn in front of 20 of the most influential people in the territory. Do you have any idea what you've done? I expressed an opinion. You humiliated yourself. You made us all look like fools. Beatrice's voice rose. We were invited to that gathering because we're still barely clinging to respectability. Do you know how hard I've worked to maintain our standing? How many favors I've called in? How much I've sacrificed to keep us from being completely cast out? I'm sorry, I didn't mean... You never mean to, but you do it anyway. You can't help yourself. Beatrice pressed her fingers to her temples. Victor Hale was there tonight. Did you know that? He was watching. And after your little performance, he found me. Asked if you were always so spirited. Clara's stomach dropped. What did you tell him? That you have strong convictions but a good heart. What else could I say? Her mother's shoulders sagged. He's coming to call tomorrow. I've already accepted on your behalf. Mother, you will receive him. You will be charming, and you will seriously consider anything he proposes, Clara, because after tonight, he might be your only option. Beatrice met her eyes, and Clara saw something she'd never seen before. Fear. Real, desperate fear. We're out of time. The bank has given us until spring. That's 4 months. 4 months to find a solution, or we lose everything. I'll fix it. I'll find a way. How? By arguing with dukes? By making enemies of everyone who could help us? Beatrice's voice broke. You're so intelligent, Clara, so principled, and it's going to destroy you, destroy all of us. She left before Clara could respond. The door closed with a soft click that felt louder than any slam. Clara stood there, surrounded by ledgers that didn't balance and bills that couldn't be paid, and let herself acknowledge the truth. Her mother was right. She'd spent so long being right about principles that she'd forgotten principles didn't pay debts, didn't save families, didn't stop the world from grinding people down. Being right didn't matter if you lost everything anyway. Victor Hale arrived the next afternoon with flowers and an easy smile that made Clara's skin crawl for reasons she couldn't articulate. They sat in the drawing room under her mother's watchful eye, making polite conversation about nothing. He was charming, attentive, said all the right things, and yet Clara couldn't shake the feeling that she was being evaluated, assessed like a horse at auction. What? I heard about last night, he said eventually, his tone carefully neutral. The discussion with Duke Blackthorne. I'm sure everyone's heard by now. It was brave. It was stupid. Maybe both. He leaned forward slightly. Can I tell you something, Miss Whitmore? Most people in your position would be falling over themselves to court favor with men like Blackthorne. But you stood up and told him he was wrong. That takes courage. Or recklessness. I haven't decided which. Does it matter? To me? No. I find both qualities interesting. His smile widened. I like that you have fire, that you're not just another decorative piece of china waiting to be placed on the right shelf. There it was again, that sense of being maneuvered, of words that sounded like compliments but felt like something else. You don't know me well enough to know what I am, Clara said. Then let me get to know you. Have dinner with me. Tomorrow night. Just the two of us. Let me prove I'm not as terrible as you clearly think I am. She wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at her to make an excuse, to maintain distance. But her mother was watching, hope and desperation mingling on her face, and Clara thought about 4 months, about debts, about Maggie's future disappearing along with everything else. Dinner would be lovely, she heard herself say. Victor's smile never wavered, but something flickered in those dark eyes. Satisfaction. Victory. Clara had just agreed to something, though she wasn't sure what, and the certainty that she'd made a terrible mistake settled into her bones like winter cold, but she smiled back anyway, because that's what you did when you were drowning. You smiled, and you pretended the water wasn't rising, and you hoped someone would notice before it was too late. The restaurant Victor chose was expensive in the way that whispered rather than shouted. Candlelight instead of chandeliers, a single violin instead of an orchestra, tables spaced far enough apart that conversations remained private. Clara recognized 3 couples from prominent families, all of whom looked away the moment she met their eyes. Word had spread faster than she'd anticipated. The woman who'd challenged Duke Blackthorne, the Whitmore girl who didn't know her place. Ignore them, Victor said, pulling out her chair with practiced ease. They're boring people leading boring lives. Let them stare. Easy for you to say, you're not the one they're gossiping about. Aren't I? He settled across from her, signaling the waiter. I'm new money courting old blood. Trust me, there's plenty of gossip to go around. The waiter appeared with wine, red, expensive, poured without asking if she wanted any. Victor raised his glass. To interesting women and the chaos they create. Clara didn't drink. Is that what you think I am? Chaos? I think you're someone who refuses to play the game everyone else has already mastered. That's either chaos or revolution, depending on how it ends. He took a sip, watching her over the rim. I haven't decided which yet. And you? What game are you playing? The same one everyone plays, survival, advancement, the acquisition of power through any means necessary. He said it so casually, like he was discussing the weather. The difference is I'm honest about it. Most people pretend they're motivated by higher principles, love, duty, honor, but strip away the pretty words and we're all just trying to climb higher on the same bloody ladder. That's a bleak worldview. It's an honest one. He leaned back as the first course arrived. Oysters, arranged like art on a bed of ice. Tell me something, Clara. May I call you Clara? You just did. So I did. His smile widened. Tell me why you really challenged Blackthorn. And don't say it was about policy. Nobody risks social suicide over policy. Clara picked up her fork, buying time. The truth was complicated. Yes, she cared about the displaced families, but there was something else, something harder to articulate. A lifetime of watching powerful men make decisions that destroyed lives while insulating themselves from consequences. A rage that had been building for years with nowhere to go. I'm tired of men like him, she said finally. Men who think wealth and position make them infallible, who mistake privilege for wisdom. And yet here you are, having dinner with another wealthy man. How does that work? You invited me. I'm being polite. You're being strategic. Your family needs money. I have money. Your mother is hoping I'll propose and solve all your problems. He cracked an oyster, the sound sharp in the quiet space between them. Am I wrong? Heat crept up Clara's neck. You're very direct. I told you, I don't believe in pretty lies. He swallowed the oyster, his gaze never leaving hers. So let's be honest with each other, shall we? You need a husband with resources. I need a wife with social standing. We could help each other. You're proposing a business arrangement. I'm proposing we acknowledge what this is instead of pretending it's something else. Romance is for people who can afford it. We can't. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. But that doesn't mean we can't be compatible. I find you fascinating, Clara. That mind of yours, that fire. I could give you freedom most women never get. Resources to pursue whatever interests you. All I'd ask in return is your name, your family's connections, and occasional public appearances as my wife. It should have been insulting. Instead, it was almost refreshing. Someone finally saying out loud what everyone else danced around. Marriage as transaction, partnership as mutual exploitation. What about children? Clara asked. Negotiable. If you want them, fine. If not, there are ways around that. And fidelity? Also negotiable, as long as we're discreet and don't embarrass each other publicly. He withdrew his hand, picking up his wine again. I'm not offering you a fairy tale, Clara. I'm offering you survival, security for your family, freedom from the constant anxiety of wondering when the creditors will come. That's worth something, isn't it? It was. That was the worst part. It was worth something. Worth a lot, actually. I need time to think, she said. Of course, but not too much time. I'm not the only man in the territory looking for a wife, and your value is dropping by the day. That scene with Blackthorn? It made you interesting to me. To everyone else, it made you difficult, unmarketable. He said it kindly, but the words still landed like blows. I'm probably your best option at this point, possibly your only option. The violin shifted to something minor, melancholy. Around them, other diners laughed and talked, living lives where choices weren't measured in months until foreclosure. Why me? Clara asked. If you just need social standing, there are easier women, more agreeable ones. Because agreeable women bore me. And because I think you're smart enough to recognize a good deal when you see one. He signaled for the next course. Besides, there's something appealing about taming a wild thing, making it choose its cage. The words sent ice through her veins, not because they were cruel, cruelty she could handle, but because they revealed something true beneath Victor's charm. He didn't want a wife. He wanted a victory, a conquest, something difficult he could claim as proof of his own power. She should have left, made an excuse, walked out, damned the consequences. But her mother's face flashed through her mind, that desperate fear. 4 months. They had 4 months. So Clara smiled, ate her dinner, made conversation, played the part of a woman considering her options, and tried not to think about the fact that she was already making excuses for a man she didn't trust. The letter from Duke Blackthorne arrived 3 days later. Clara found it on the breakfast table, her name written in elegant script on heavy paper sealed with the Blackthorne crest. Her mother hovered nearby, torn between curiosity and apprehension. "What could he possibly want?" Beatrice murmured. Clara broke the seal and read, "Miss Whitmore, our conversation at my gathering, while contentious, raised several points worthy of further discussion. I'm hosting a smaller, more informal dinner next week to explore these land reform issues with a select group of stakeholders. Your perspective, however misinformed, might prove valuable. If you can manage to be civil for an entire evening, I would welcome your attendance. Regards, Adrian Blackthorne." However misinformed. Clara read the line again, something hot and sharp rising in her chest. "He's the most arrogant—" "What does it say?" Maggie appeared, stealing the letter before Clara could stop her. She read it quickly, eyebrows rising. "Oh my! He invited you to dinner." "He invited me to be patronized in a more intimate setting." "He invited you." Maggie handed the letter back, something calculating in her expression. "Do you know what this means? Duke Blackthorne doesn't waste time on people he considers irrelevant. If he's inviting you to a private dinner, he either wants to humiliate you or he's actually interested in what you have to say. Or he wants to prove me wrong in front of a smaller audience. So prove him wrong back." Maggie grinned. "You were brilliant at his gathering, Clara. Terrifying, but brilliant. Go to this dinner. Make your case properly. Show him you're not just some woman with opinions. You're someone who knows what she's talking about." Beatrice looked between her daughters, clearly torn. "I'm not sure this is wise. After the last gathering, the most powerful man in the territory is inviting Clara to dinner," Maggie interrupted. "That's not nothing, Mother. That's an opportunity." "An opportunity for what? To make more enemies? To further damage our reputation?" "Our reputation is already damaged," Clara said quietly. "Might as well make it count for something." She wrote her acceptance that afternoon, keeping the tone coolly professional. "Your Grace, I appreciate the invitation and the confidence that I can manage civility for an entire evening, though I make no promises about the rest of the week. I look forward to our discussion. Clara Whitmore." The response came back within hours. "Miss Whitmore, I'll take what I can get. A.B." Despite herself, Clara smiled. Victor was less pleased when she told him about the invitation during his next visit. "Blackthorne." He said the name like it tasted bad. "What does he want with you?" "To discuss policy, apparently." "Blackthorne doesn't discuss policy with unmarried women. He's either trying to humiliate you or seduce you, possibly both." Victor's pleasant mask slipped, revealing something harder underneath. "You should decline." "I've already accepted." "Then unaccept. Send your regrets. Tell him you're ill." Clara set down her teacup with deliberate care. "I'm not in the habit of breaking commitments, and I'm certainly not going to avoid an opportunity just because you're uncomfortable with it. I'm trying to protect you." "I don't need protection. I need to understand why you think you have any say in my decisions." They stared at each other. The drawing room felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. Victor's jaw worked like he was physically restraining himself from saying something he'd regret. Finally, he smiled, that practiced, easy smile that never reached his eyes. "You're right. I apologize. I'm overstepping. It's just that I've heard stories about Blackthorne and women. He has a reputation." "For what?" "For getting what he wants, by whatever means necessary." Clara thought about the Duke, his cool assessment, his obvious intelligence, the way he'd looked at her like she was a puzzle to solve. Dangerous, maybe, but not in the way Victor was implying. "I can handle myself," she said. "Can you?" Victor leaned forward, his voice dropping. "You're playing a game you don't understand, Clara. Men like Blackthorne don't invite women to private dinners out of intellectual curiosity. They do it because they want something, and they usually get it." "Then I'll make sure I get something too. That's how negotiations work, isn't it?" Something flickered across Victor's face. Anger, frustration, something else she couldn't identify. Then it was gone, replaced by that smooth charm. "Just be careful," he said. "I'd hate to see you hurt." But the way he said it made Clara think he'd hate to see her escape more. The Blackthorn dinner was nothing like the first gathering. No crowds, no formality, just 8 people around a table in a private dining room that managed to be both elegant and comfortable. Clara recognized a few faces: a territorial representative, a progressive banker, a woman who ran a legal aid society, people who actually cared about policy rather than profit. Adrian Blackthorn sat at the head of the table, and Clara was surprised to find herself seated to his right. "Miss Whitmore." He stood as she entered, offering a slight bow. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't entirely certain you would." "I wasn't entirely certain I should, but curiosity won." "Honest as always," he gestured to her chair. "I hope you brought that sharp tongue. This group doesn't believe in polite avoidance of difficult topics." The dinner started with safer subjects: recent territorial legislation, infrastructure projects, trade agreements. Clara listened more than she spoke, getting a sense of the dynamics. The banker, Thomas Chen, was brilliant and direct. The representative, Sarah Marks, was careful and political. The legal aid director, Ruth Castellano, was passionate to the point of fierceness. And Adrian Blackthorn presided over it all with the ease of someone used to managing strong personalities. It wasn't until the main course that the conversation shifted to land reform. "The displacement numbers are worse than the official reports suggest," Ruth said, her fork scraping against china. "We're seeing families arrive in cities with nothing: no money, no prospects, no support systems. The compensation they receive barely covered moving costs, let alone establishing new lives." "That's a failure of implementation, not policy," Adrian countered. "The framework is sound. If assessors are undervaluing land, we address that. We don't abandon the entire system." "The system creates the incentives for undervaluation," Clara said. Everyone turned to look at her. "When the same banks financing the acquisitions also influence the assessment process, of course there's downward pressure on valuations. It's not a bug, it's a feature." "You're suggesting deliberate corruption." "I'm suggesting structural incentives that produce corrupt outcomes even when individual actors think they're being fair. It's worse than deliberate corruption because it's invisible, systemic." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "And your solution?" "Independent assessment boards with no financial stake in the outcomes. Mandatory appeals processes that don't cost money displaced families don't have. Transitional support that actually helps people establish new lives instead of just shuffling them off the land and calling it progress. That would slow the entire process down." "Good. Speed isn't a virtue when you're destroying communities." Thomas Chen laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. "She has a point, Adrian. We've been prioritizing efficiency over ethics. Maybe we need to recalibrate." "Ethics that ignore practical realities are just performance," Adrian shot back. But he was looking at Clara differently now, less like a puzzle, more like an equal. "But I take your point. The appeals process needs work. I can address that. Can you? Or will you just form another committee that produces another report everyone ignores?" "You don't think much of my commitment to reform, do you?" "I think you're committed to reform that doesn't threaten your fundamental interests. That's not the same thing." Silence fell. The other guests suddenly found their plates fascinating. Adrian set down his wine glass with careful precision. "You think I'm a hypocrite. I think you're a man who benefits from the current system trying to fix its worst excesses while preserving his own power. That's not hypocrisy. It's just limited. And you could do better. I'd try different things. Whether that's better, I don't know. But at least I'd acknowledge what I was sacrificing and who I was sacrificing it for. Fair enough?" He picked up his glass again, his expression unreadable. "What if I offered you the chance to try? Not hypothetically, actually." Clara blinked. "What?" "I'm forming a reform oversight committee. Real authority, not symbolic. Power to investigate implementation failures, recommend policy changes, hold assessors and administrators accountable." He leaned back, watching her. "I want you on it." "Me? You have perspective I don't, passion I've lost, if I ever had it. And you're smart enough to channel that passion into practical proposals instead of just righteous anger." His mouth quirked. "Also, having you inside the process means you can't publicly eviscerate me quite as effectively. That's worth something." Ruth Castellano grinned. He's trying to co-opt you. Obviously, Adrian agreed. But that doesn't make the offer less genuine. We need people who actually care about outcomes, not just optics. You care, Miss Whitmore. Possibly to the point of self-destruction. I can work with that. Clara's mind raced. This was an opportunity, a real one. The chance to actually influence policy instead of just complaining about it. To help the families being displaced. To do something that mattered. But accepting meant aligning herself with Adrian Blackthorne. Becoming associated with reforms she'd publicly criticized. It meant compromise, something she'd always been terrible at. I need time to think about it, she said. Of course, but not too long. The committee convenes in 3 weeks. He raised his glass. To uncomfortable conversations and the people brave enough to have them. The others drank. Clara joined them, very aware of Adrian's gaze on her, assessing, calculating. She'd come here expecting to be patronized. Instead, she'd been offered power. The question was whether it was power she could actually use, or just another cage with prettier bars. The conversation stayed with her over the following days, circling her thoughts like a persistent wasp. She tried to discuss it with her mother, but Beatrice only saw complications. An oversight committee. Clara, that's political. It will make you enemies. I already have enemies. More enemies. Powerful ones. And for what? The chance to attend meetings and write reports nobody reads? Adrian said the committee would have real authority. Adrian? Beatrice's eyebrows rose. You're calling Duke Blackthorne by his first name now. It slipped out. Did it? Her mother's expression was troubled. Be careful, Clara. Men like Blackthorne don't offer women opportunities out of altruism. He wants something from you. Maybe he just wants to improve the system. Maybe. Or maybe he wants you close where he can control you, where he can shape your opinions, influence your choices. Beatrice touched her daughter's cheek. You have such faith in your own judgment, but you're not as immune to manipulation as you think. The words stung because they might be true. Clara had always prided herself on seeing through people's facades. But what if her ability to see through lies made her vulnerable to someone who told better truths? She was still wrestling with the decision when Victor arrived unannounced that evening. We need to talk, he said, brushing past the servant who'd answered the door. His usual polish was missing, replaced by something urgent and raw. Clara met him in the drawing room, suddenly aware they were alone. Her parents were dining with neighbors, Maggie visiting a friend. What's wrong? What's wrong? Victor laughed, sharp and humorless. I heard about Blackthorne's offer. The whole territory has heard. You're considering joining his committee. How did you but... Does it matter? Tell me you're not actually thinking about accepting. Clara crossed her arms. Why shouldn't I? Because it's a trap. He's isolating you from potential allies, binding you to his agenda, making you dependent on his patronage. Victor moved closer, his intensity almost frightening. Once you accept, you're his. He'll control what you can say, who you can associate with, every aspect of your public life. Is that what you want? What I want is to actually help people instead of just talking about it. By aligning yourself with the man destroying them, do you not see the contradiction? I see the chance to change things from the inside. That's more than I have now. You'd have more as my wife. The words came out harsh, desperate. Marry me, Clara. Today, tomorrow, whenever you want. I'll pay off your family's debts, give you complete financial freedom, ask nothing in return except your name. You want to help displaced families? I'll fund a private relief organization. You can run it however you want, answer to no one. Real independence, not Blackthorne's political theater. Clara stared at him. You're proposing. I'm offering you a choice, him or me. His committee or actual power. Victor's hands found her shoulders, his grip just shy of painful. I can give you everything he's offering and more. But you have to choose now, Clara, before it's too late. Victor, you're hurting me. He released her immediately, stepping back, running hands through his hair. I'm sorry. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw something real beneath the charm. Fear. I can't lose this. Can't lose you. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you're exactly what I need, what I've been looking for. His voice softened, became almost pleading. Please, Clara, don't do this. Don't choose Blackthorne over me. There was something wrong here. Something off in his desperation, his urgency. This wasn't about love or even practical marriage arrangements. This was about possession, control. "I need you to leave," Clara said quietly. "Clara." "Now, Victor, please." He stood there, breathing hard, his hands clenching and unclenching. For a moment she thought he might refuse, might push harder. Then something shuddered in his expression. "This isn't over," he said. "You think you have choices, but you don't. Not really. The Blackthorn offer? It will evaporate the moment he gets what he wants. Your family's debts? They're worse than you know. Your mother's been hiding the true numbers. You have weeks, Clara, maybe days." "How do you know that?" He smiled, and it was the coldest thing she'd ever seen. "Because I bought the debt. 3 days ago. Every note, every loan, every mortgage. Your family owes me now. Only me." The world tilted. "You what?" "I'm your only option. I've made sure of it." He moved toward the door, his composure returning like armor sliding back into place. "Think about that while you're deciding between committees and power. Think about what happens to your sister, your parents, when I call those debts due. That's blackmail. That's business. You have 1 week to accept my proposal. After that," he shrugged. "Well, banks foreclose. Families lose everything. These things happen." He left before she could respond, the door closing with a soft click that felt like a cell door locking. Clara stood in the empty drawing room, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Victor had bought their debt, had maneuvered her into a corner with no exits. Every choice she thought she had was an illusion. She could marry him or watch her family destroyed. Unless, the thought came sharp and clear. Adrian had offered her a position on his committee. That meant he valued her perspective, her intelligence. If she explained the situation, if she asked for help, would he intervene? Could he? It was a terrible risk, admitting vulnerability to a man she barely knew, trusting him with information that could destroy her. But the alternative was marrying Victor, and every instinct she had screamed that would end badly. Clara made her decision. She'd go to Adrian Blackthorn, tell him everything, and pray that the man who claimed to want reform actually meant it. Because if he didn't, she was finished. The servant who answered the door at Blackthorn Manor looked at Clara like she'd lost her mind. "Miss, it's past 9 o'clock. His Grace doesn't receive callers at this hour. Tell him it's Clara Whitmore. Tell him it's urgent." "I really can't." "Then I'll wait in the entrance hall until morning if I have to." Clara pushed past him, her hands shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. "Please, just tell him I'm here." The servant hesitated, clearly weighing propriety against the very real possibility that this unhinged woman would camp in the foyer. Finally, he nodded and disappeared up the stairs, leaving Clara alone in the cavernous entrance hall. She'd come straight from home, not even stopping to change from the simple day dress she'd been wearing. No carriage. She'd walked the 2 miles in the dark, her mind racing too fast for patience. The whole way she'd rehearsed what she'd say, how she'd explain without sounding desperate or foolish. But now, standing in Adrian's house uninvited at an ungodly hour, desperation and foolishness were pretty much all she had. "Miss Whitmore." She spun. Adrian stood at the top of the stairs in shirt sleeves, no jacket, his dark hair slightly mussed like he'd been running his hands through it. He descended slowly, his expression unreadable. "I apologize for the intrusion," Clara said. "I know it's inappropriate." "It's fine." He reached the bottom step, studying her. "You look like you've seen a ghost. What happened?" The concern in his voice nearly undid her. She'd expected irritation, dismissal, maybe amusement at her audacity. Not this quiet care that made her throat tight. "I need to talk to you, privately." He nodded, leading her to a smaller study off the main hall. A fire burned low in the grate. Papers covered the desk. He'd been working. Adrian closed the door and gestured to a chair, but Clara couldn't sit, couldn't stop moving. "Victor Hale bought my family's debt," she said. "All of it. Every loan, every mortgage. He did it 3 days ago and told me tonight. He's demanding I marry him within the week, or he'll call it due and destroy us." Adrian went very still. "He threatened you. He proposed. The threat was implied." Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "I came here because I don't know what else to do. I have no leverage, no resources, no options. And I hoped that maybe you could help, or at least tell me if I'm completely trapped." "Sit down." "I can't." "Clara, sit." It wasn't a request. She sank into the chair, suddenly exhausted. Adrian moved to a cabinet, poured 2 glasses of brandy, and handed her one. "Drink." She obeyed. The alcohol burned, but it steadied her. Adrian took the chair across from her, his mind clearly working. "Tell me everything. When did Hale first approach you? What exactly has he said? Don't leave anything out." So Clara talked. The dinner where he'd proposed the business arrangement, his reaction to Adrian's committee invitation, tonight's confrontation, the desperation in his eyes, the cold calculation in his final threat. She laid it all out, feeling smaller with every word. "He's been planning this," Adrian said when she finished. "Probably since before he ever met you. Men like Hale don't make impulsive moves." "What do you mean, men like Hale?" "Men who collect things. Power, property, people." He stood, pacing to the fire. "I've been making inquiries about him since that first gathering. His background is concerning." "Concerning how?" Adrian turned, firelight shadowing his features. "He came from the Southern Territories 3 years ago with a fortune and no clear source for it. Built his wealth through land acquisition, always at suspiciously favorable terms. There have been rumors. Families who refused to sell suddenly facing unexpected financial crises. Business partners who vanished when deals went sour. Nothing proven, but a pattern." Ice slid down Clara's spine. "You think he's dangerous. I think he's ruthless. And I think he's fixated on you for reasons that have nothing to do with love or even practical marriage arrangements." Adrian's jaw tightened. "The debt purchase confirms it. He's not courting you. He's cornering you." "So what do I do?" "You don't marry him. That's non-negotiable." The certainty in his voice startled her. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one watching your family lose everything." "No, but I'm the one with enough capital to buy that debt back." He said it casually, like offering to buy her lunch. "I'll contact Hale's bank tomorrow. Make an offer he can't refuse. The debt transfers to me, your family continues making payments on the original terms, and Hale loses his leverage." Clara stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because letting a predator trap you into marriage offends my sense of justice. And because I need you on that committee with your judgment intact, not compromised by fear or obligation to a man like Hale." He met her eyes. "This isn't charity, Clara. It's strategy. Strategy that costs you a fortune." "I have several fortunes. What's one more debt portfolio?" But something shifted in his expression, something less certain. "Unless you'd rather I didn't interfere, it's your choice. I'm offering help, not dictating terms." The question hung between them. Clara thought about Victor's cold smile, his possessive intensity, the way he'd grabbed her shoulders. Thought about Adrian, who'd invited her to dinner to argue with him, offered her a position of actual power, and was now proposing to save her family without demanding anything in return. "Do it," she said. "Please, buy the debt." Relief flickered across Adrian's face so quickly she almost missed it. "I'll handle it first thing tomorrow. In the meantime, you should go home. It's late, and if anyone sees you leaving here at this hour, my reputation is already destroyed. What's one more scandal? Your reputation is damaged, not destroyed. There's a difference." He rang for a servant. "I'll have my carriage take you home." "And Clara?" He waited until she looked at him. "You're not trapped. Not anymore. Remember that." The carriage ride home felt surreal. Clara watched the darkened streets pass, her mind spinning. In the space of an hour, everything had changed. Adrian was buying her family's debt, freeing her from Victor's trap, asking nothing in return except her presence on a committee she'd already been considering joining. It was too easy, too convenient. Men didn't just rescue women out of altruism. Her mother had been right about that. Adrian wanted something. She just didn't know what yet. The house was dark when she arrived. She slipped inside, expecting everyone to be asleep. Instead, she found her mother waiting in the drawing room, still fully dressed. "Where have you been?" Beatrice's voice was tight. "I came home and you were gone. No note, no explanation. I went to see Duke Blackthorn." Her mother went pale. "At this hour? Clara, have you lost your mind?" "Probably." Clara sank onto the sofa, suddenly too tired to stand. "Victor bought our debt. He told me tonight. Said I have a week to accept his proposal or he'll destroy us." Beatrice's hand flew to her throat. "No, he wouldn't." "He did, and he meant it." Clara looked at her mother. Why didn't you tell me how bad things were? You said spring. You didn't say days. Because I didn't want you to panic. Didn't want you making desperate choices out of fear. Beatrice lowered herself into a chair. What did you tell Victor? Nothing. I came straight to Adrian, to Duke Blackthorne. He's buying the debt back, taking it off Hale's hands. The silence that followed was absolute. He's what? Buying our debt tomorrow. Said it was strategy, not charity. Clara laughed, the sound brittle. So we've traded one wealthy creditor for another. I'm not sure if that's better or just different. It's better. Beatrice's voice was firm. Blackthorne is many things, but he's not a predator. He won't use the debt as a weapon. He'll let us pay according to terms, maintain our dignity. She studied her daughter. What did he ask for in return? Nothing. He said he wants me on his committee without being compromised by fear or obligation to Hale. That's all? That's what he said. Beatrice was quiet for a long moment. Then, be careful with Duke Blackthorne, Clara. Not because I think he'll hurt you deliberately, but because a man who rescues you can start to feel like he owns you. And that's dangerous in different ways than Victor's threats. Clara thought about Adrian's intensity, his certainty, the way he'd looked at her in the firelight. I know. Do you? Her mother reached over, touching her hand. You've spent your whole life being so sure of yourself, so confident in your ability to see through people's motivations. But attraction makes us blind, and power makes us grateful. That combination has destroyed more women than I can count. I'm not attracted to him. Beatrice just smiled sadly, like Clara had said something foolish and young. If you say so, dear. The next morning, Clara woke to chaos. She came downstairs to find her father in his study with two men she didn't recognize, lawyers from their dress and demeanor. Voices carried through the closed door, tense and urgent. Maggie intercepted her in the hall. They've been here since dawn. Something about the debt, about Victor Hale refusing to sell. Clara's stomach dropped. What? Father received a letter first thing this morning, from Hale's attorney. Apparently Duke Blackthorne made an offer to purchase our debt, but Hale declined. Said it wasn't for sale at any price. Maggie's eyes were wide. Clara, what's happening? Why would Blackthorne try to buy our debt? Before Clara could answer, the study door opened. Edmund emerged, his face ashen. Behind him, one of the lawyers was still talking, something about legal options and contractual obligations. Clara, her father's voice shook. We need to talk now. They retreated to the library, Maggie following despite Edmund's half-hearted protest. Once the door closed, he turned on Clara. What did you do? I went to Duke Blackthorne, told him about Victor's ultimatum. He offered to buy the debt. Without consulting me? Without discussing it with the family? Edmund's hands trembled. Do you have any idea what you've done? Hale's attorney is threatening to accelerate the debt immediately. He's saying your relationship with Blackthorne constitutes a material change in our financial reliability. He can call the entire amount due within 30 days. The room tilted. He can't do that. He can. There's a clause. Edmund pressed his fingers to his temples. It doesn't matter. The point is he will unless we agree to his terms. Which are? You marry him within the week, as originally demanded, or we lose everything and he pursues legal action against Duke Blackthorne for attempted interference in a private financial arrangement. Edmund looked at her, and Clara saw something break behind his eyes. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but I don't see another way out. There has to be... There isn't. Her father's voice cracked. I've looked. The lawyers have looked. Hale structured everything perfectly. He has us trapped, and your involvement with Blackthorne just gave him the excuse to tighten the noose. Maggie touched Clara's arm. Maybe it won't be so bad. Victor seems to care about you. Maybe once you're married, he doesn't care about me. He wants to own me. Clara pulled away, pacing. There has to be something, some legal recourse, some loophole. The only loophole is giving him what he wants. Edmund sank into a chair. I'm sorry, Clara. I failed you, failed this entire family. But if you don't marry Hale, we lose the estate, our position, everything. And he'll make sure we're destroyed completely. No mercy, no second chances. The walls felt like they were closing in. Clara thought about Victor's cold smile, his calculating eyes, the way he'd talked about taming wild things. Thought about spending the rest of her life bound to a man who saw her as a possession to be acquired and controlled. I need air. She headed for the door. Clara. But she was already moving, fleeing the house, the suffocating weight of impossible choices. She walked without direction, her mind blank with panic, until she found herself at the edge of the estate's old gardens. The fountain here didn't work anymore, another casualty of their declining fortunes, but the stone bench beside it offered somewhere to sit while the world fell apart. I thought I might find you here. Adrian's voice made her jump. She turned to find him approaching through the overgrown paths, still dressed formally despite the early hour. How did you know where to look? Your sister told me you'd headed toward the gardens. I took a chance. He sat beside her without asking permission. I heard about Hale's refusal. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. No, but I'm working on something that might. He pulled a document from his jacket. I had my attorneys review Hale's debt purchase. There are irregularities. The acquisition happened too quickly, went through channels that suggest prior arrangement. If we can prove he engineered your family's financial crisis deliberately to create leverage for marriage, that's criminal conspiracy. Hope flickered, then died. Proving that would take months. We have weeks. Days, maybe. Which is why I'm proposing something more immediate. Adrian turned to face her fully. Marry me instead. Clara's breath stopped. What? Not a real marriage, a strategic one. We announce an engagement immediately, get married within the week before Hale can accelerate the debt. Once you're legally my wife, his leverage disappears. Your family's financial situation becomes my concern, which means I can restructure the debt however I want. He loses. That's insane. It's practical. You need protection from Hale. I can provide it. In exchange, you join my committee, help me actually reform these policies instead of just managing their worst excesses. We both get what we want. Clara stared at him. You're asking me to marry you to escape marrying someone else. Do you hear how ridiculous that sounds? I hear how practical it sounds. You need a solution that doesn't require faith in the legal system or months of investigation. This is immediate, effective, and solves multiple problems at once. His expression was serious, intent. I'm not asking you to love me, Clara. I'm asking you to trust me enough to accept help when you need it. Why? The word came out raw. Why would you do this? You barely know me. This isn't strategy. This is sacrifice. What do you possibly gain that's worth binding yourself to someone like me? Something shifted in Adrian's face. For just a moment, the polished aristocrat disappeared, replaced by someone younger, more uncertain. Because watching Hale trap you makes me furious in ways I don't entirely understand, he said quietly. Because you're the first person in years who's looked at my policies and told me I was wrong without flinching. Because I think you might actually be able to help me fix things that are broken, but only if you're free to speak honestly instead of constantly calculating survival. He paused. And because the idea of you married to a man who frightens you is unacceptable to me. So if you want a selfish reason, there it is. I can't stand it. The honesty in his voice hit harder than any practiced charm. Clara saw the truth in his eyes. This wasn't just strategy. Whatever Adrian's motivations, they were real. Complicated maybe, but real. This is madness, she said. Probably, but it's better than the alternative. He stood, offering his hand. Come back to the manor with me. We'll draft the announcement, notify the relevant parties, and set a date. 3 days from now. Quick enough to preempt Hale, long enough to be legally proper. My parents will be relieved their daughter isn't being forced into marriage with a predator. We'll handle their concerns. His hand remained extended, steady and certain. Trust me, Clara. Just for today. We'll figure out the rest as we go. She looked at that offered hand. Thought about Victor's grip on her shoulders, the possessive gleam in his eyes. Thought about her family losing everything, Maggie's future destroyed, her parents humiliated and broken. Then she thought about Adrian, arguing with her over dinner, offering her power instead of protection, looking at her like she was worth saving. Clara took his hand. The announcement went out that afternoon, delivered by messenger to every prominent family in the territory. By evening, the scandal was complete. Clara Whitmore, the outspoken daughter of a failing estate, engaged to Duke Adrian Blackthorne after a whirlwind courtship of less than 2 weeks. The reactions were predictable. Shock, outrage, speculation about what favors had been traded, What scandals were being covered up? Clara's mother oscillated between relief and mortification. Her father looked 10 years younger, the weight of impending ruin lifted from his shoulders. Maggie was suspiciously delighted, like she'd known this would happen all along. But it was Victor's response that made Clara's blood run cold. The letter arrived the next morning, delivered by a messenger who waited for no reply. My dear Clara, how clever you think you are. How resourceful. Running to Blackthorn for protection like a frightened rabbit seeking shelter in a wolf's den. But you've made a mistake, a fatal one. I wanted you willing, wanted you to choose me, to see the wisdom in alliance. Now you forced my hand. Now I have to take more direct measures. The engagement changes nothing. Blackthorn can't protect you from everything, can't watch you every moment, can't prevent the accidents that happen to people who cross me. Ask around about my former business partners, Clara. Ask what happened to the families who refused my offers in the Southern Territories. Ask, and then think very carefully about what you've done. You had a chance to walk into this cage with dignity. Now you'll be dragged. With enduring affection, Victor. Clara's hands shook as she read it a second time. This wasn't the polished charm or even the cold calculation she'd seen before. This was something uglier, a threat barely disguised as a love letter. She found Adrian in his study, buried in paperwork related to their upcoming wedding. He took one look at her face and stood. What happened? She handed him the letter, watched his expression darken as he read. This is a direct threat. I know. We need to involve the authorities. This is grounds for what? He didn't explicitly threaten violence, just made ominous implications about accidents and former business partners. Clara sank into a chair. We have no proof of anything, and by the time we could gather evidence, he'll have already… She couldn't finish the sentence. Adrian crumpled the letter, his jaw tight. He's not touching you. I'll double the security, have people watching him, make sure he can't get anywhere near you or your family. He's already gotten to us. He bought our debt, maneuvered us into exactly this situation. You think guards will stop him? Clara looked up. I've been asking around like he suggested, about those business partners and families. 3 people dead in suspicious circumstances over the last 5 years, 2 more who disappeared completely. And nothing proven, nothing charged, because Victor's very good at making things look like accidents or voluntary departures. All the more reason to get you protected, to accelerate the wedding timeline. To what? Get married tomorrow? That won't change his fixation, won't make him less dangerous. She stood, moving to the window. Outside, the Blackthorn Gardens sprawled in perfect order. Everything controlled, everything beautiful. Nothing like the chaos eating her from the inside. There's another option, Adrian said carefully. What? We make him think he's won, cancel the engagement, announce it was a mistake. You go to him, apologize, agree to his terms. Clara spun. You're suggesting I actually marry Victor? I'm suggesting we make him think you're going to. Buy time for my investigators to find something concrete. Evidence we can use to have him arrested, charged, removed as a threat permanently. Adrian moved closer. It's risky. You'd have to convince him you'd changed your mind, that you were scared enough to capitulate. But if you could pull it off, if I could pull it off, I'd be trapped alone with a man who's killed people for less than defying him. Clara's voice rose. You're asking me to put myself in danger to gather evidence that might not even exist. I'm asking you to consider options. I'm not demanding anything. Aren't you? You just suggested I cancel our engagement and throw myself to the wolves to solve your investigative problem. That sounds like a demand to me. I'm trying to protect you. By sacrificing me? By using me as bait? Clara laughed, the sound harsh. You're exactly like him. Oh, you dress it up prettier, call it strategy instead of ownership, but you're still a man trying to control my choices because you think you know better. Adrian's face went very still. That's not fair, isn't it? You proposed marriage without asking what I wanted, bought protection I didn't request. Now you're suggesting I endanger myself for the sake of evidence collection. At what point do I actually get a choice in my own life? The words hung between them, sharp and cutting. Adrian stepped back, something wounded crossing his expression. You're right, he said quietly. I've been making decisions for you, assuming I knew best. That was wrong. He moved to his desk, pulled out a document. This is the marriage contract my lawyers drafted. It includes provisions for separation, for your financial independence, regardless of the marriage's outcome. for your freedom to pursue whatever interests you want without my permission or interference. He handed it to her. Clara scanned the pages, her anger wavering. The contract was generous to the point of absurdity. She'd retain her own property rights, have access to substantial funds, could dissolve the marriage at any time with no penalty. Why would you agree to these terms? Because I'm not trying to trap you. I'm trying to give you options, real ones, not just escapes from worse alternatives. Adrian met her eyes. You're angry because you've been backed into corners your entire life. By circumstance, by your family's debts, by men who see you as a problem to solve or a prize to win. I'm trying to be different. But if I'm failing, tell me how. Tell me what you actually want, and I'll do everything in my power to make it happen. The sincerity in his voice broke something in Clara's chest. She'd been so focused on maintaining her anger, her independence, that she hadn't stopped to consider he might actually mean what he said. I don't want to be rescued, she said finally. I want to fight my own battles, make my own choices, even if they're wrong. Then make them. I'm offering marriage as a shield, not a cage. You decide how to use it. And if I decide to face Victor alone, to call his bluff and deal with the consequences myself, then I'll respect that choice and help however you'll let me. Adrian's expression was steady, certain. But I'd rather you didn't, because men like Victor don't bluff. They escalate. And I can't, his voice caught. I can't stand by and watch you get hurt when I have the power to prevent it. Clara studied him, saw past the aristocratic bearing, the polished confidence, to the man underneath. Someone who'd been lonely in his power, who'd built walls to protect himself from caring too much, who was now tearing those walls down because she'd somehow slipped past his defenses. This fake marriage, she said, if we go through with it, what happens after? We stay married as long as it serves both our purposes. You get security, freedom to work on reforms. I get your perspective on the committee, maybe someone to argue with who doesn't care about my title. He smiled slightly. When you want out, we dissolve it quietly. No scandal, no penalty. You walk away with enough money to do whatever you want for the rest of your life. And if I want something more? The question surprised them both. Adrian's eyes widened fractionally. More? I don't know, maybe. Eventually. Clara felt heat creep up her neck. I'm not saying I do. I'm just asking what happens if the fake becomes real. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, like he was testing fragile ground. Then we'd figure it out together, like everything else. He took a step closer. But I'm not asking for that, Clara. I'm not expecting it. This arrangement is about giving you freedom, not binding you to me. What if I don't want freedom from you specifically? The air between them changed, charged with something that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had always been there, just hidden under arguments and strategy. Adrian reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek. His hand was warm, careful. Then we'd have a very different conversation, he said quietly. But not now. Not when you're scared and cornered and I'm the only safe harbor in sight. That's not fair to either of us. He was right. Clara knew he was right. But his hand on her face felt like the first honest thing she'd experienced in weeks. The wedding is in 2 days, she said. It is. Victor will try something before then. You know he will. I know, which is why you're staying here until the ceremony. Guest room fully staffed, guards at every entrance. You don't leave the manor grounds without protection. You're imprisoning me. I'm keeping you alive. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. Let me do this, Clara. Let me protect you just for 2 days. After that, you can make whatever choices you want. Fight whatever battles you need to. But give me this. She should have argued, should have demanded independence, refused protection, insisted on handling Victor herself. But she was tired. So tired of being strong, being right, being the one who never bent. 2 days, she agreed. 2 days, he echoed. The guest room was larger than Clara's entire bedroom at home, decorated in blues and silvers that caught the afternoon light. A maid appeared with her things. Someone had already sent for her belongings, arranged everything without asking. Clara should have been annoyed. Instead, she felt only relief. Maggie arrived that evening, breathless and delighted. Mother sent me to keep you company, also to make sure you're not being held hostage. She swept into the room, examining everything with bright curiosity. Although honestly, if this is captivity, sign me up. It's temporary. Everything's temporary if you're pessimistic enough. Maggie flopped onto the bed. So, you're really marrying Duke Blackthorne, the man you publicly eviscerated 2 weeks ago. It's complicated. It's insane, which is why I love it. Her sister grinned. He's desperately in love with you, you know. He's not... Oh, please. I saw the way he looked at you when he came to the house today. Like you were the only real thing in a room full of ghosts. Maggie propped herself on her elbows. The question is whether you feel the same way. I don't know what I feel. Everything's happened so fast. Love usually does. The slow-building kind is for novels. Maggie's expression softened. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Victor Hale is wrong. Fundamentally, deeply wrong. Adrian might be arrogant and overbearing, but he's good. You can see it in how he talks about reform, about wanting to fix things. Victor just wants to own things. How did you get so wise? I pay attention. People think I'm just pretty and charming, so they talk freely around me. You'd be surprised what I hear. She sat up. Speaking of which, I heard something about Victor this afternoon, a rumor from one of the Southern Territory families. Clara's attention sharpened. What kind of rumor? About a woman, someone he was courting down south before he came here. She refused his proposal, married someone else. A few months later, her husband died. Hunting accident, they said. But there were questions, inconsistencies. Maggie's voice dropped. The woman disappeared 6 months after that, never found. The official story was she ran away, couldn't handle the grief, but her family thinks Victor took her. Ice flooded Clara's veins. Why haven't I heard this before? Because it's just a rumor. No proof, no evidence. But the family believes it, and they say Victor's been looking for a replacement ever since. Someone with the same fire, the same refusal to submit. Maggie met her eyes. Someone exactly like you. The room felt colder suddenly, darker despite the fire burning in the grate. Clara thought about Victor's intensity, his fixation, the way he'd talked about taming wild things. I need to tell Adrian. Tell me what? Both women jumped. Adrian stood in the doorway, his expression concerned. Sorry, I knocked. The maid said to come in. He glanced between them. What's wrong? Maggie repeated the story, her voice steady despite the subject matter. Adrian's face grew progressively darker as she talked. This woman, he said when she finished. Do you have a name? Catherine Marsh. Her family still lives in the Southern Territories. They might talk to your investigators. I'll send someone tonight. Adrian moved into the room, his focus on Clara. This changes things. If we can connect Victor to Catherine Marsh's disappearance, we have grounds for arrest. Real evidence, not just suspicion. How long will that take? Days, maybe. A week at most. He crouched beside her chair, bringing himself to eye level. Can you stay safe that long? Can you trust me to keep you protected while we build the case? Clara wanted to say yes, wanted to believe safety was possible, that guards and walls could keep Victor at bay. But she'd seen the calculation in his eyes, the cold certainty that he would get what he wanted. I'll try, she said. It was the best she could offer. The attack came the next night, 12 hours before the wedding. Clara was sleeping when the sound woke her, not loud, just wrong. A scrape of metal, a whisper of movement. She opened her eyes to darkness and the certainty that someone else was in the room. Don't scream. Victor's voice, soft and close. Clara's heart slammed into her throat. She started to sit up, but his hand pressed her down, not hard but firm. I said don't. The guards are unconscious, not dead. I'd like to keep it that way. He leaned closer, and she could smell brandy on his breath. We need to talk, Clara. Really talk. Without Blackthorne's interference. How did you get in here? I'm very good at getting into places I'm not wanted. It's a useful skill. His hand moved from her shoulder to her throat, not squeezing, but resting there. A reminder of power, of vulnerability. You've made this so much harder than it needed to be. All I wanted was a wife, a partner, someone brilliant and beautiful to stand beside me while I built an empire. Why couldn't you just accept that? Because you don't want a partner. You want a possession. Is that what you think? His laugh was soft, sad almost. You don't understand me at all. I've spent my whole life acquiring things. Land, money, power. None of it means anything. None of it fills the emptiness. But you could. You're the first person I've met who's real, who refuses to be owned or diminished. That's what I want, Clara. That fire, that strength. By threatening me, by trapping me, by showing you we're the same. Both of us fighting against a world that wants to grind us down, reduce us to acceptable pieces. Together we could be unstoppable, but Blackthorn's turned you against me. Made you think I'm the enemy when he's the one controlling you, manipulating your choices. Get off me. Clara shoved hard, catching Victor off balance. She rolled away, lunging for the door, but he was faster. His arm locked around her waist, yanking her back. They crashed into a side table, porcelain shattering. Stop fighting me! Let go! His hand covered her mouth, cutting off her scream. Clara bit down hard, tasting blood. Victor cursed, his grip loosening just enough. She broke free, ran for the door, her fingers closing on the handle. The door burst open from the outside. Adrian stood there, still in evening clothes, a pistol in his hand. For one frozen moment, the three of them stared at each other. Then Victor moved, his hand going to something in his jacket. Adrian raised the gun. Don't. Victor smiled, his hand emerging empty. You'd shoot me? The Duke with the reputation for civilized reform? To protect her? Without hesitation. Adrian's voice was cold, absolute. Step away from Clara, now. Or what? You'll murder me in your own home? That'll play well in the courts. It'll play fine when they find out you broke in, assaulted my fiancée, and threatened her life. Self-defense is a compelling argument. Adrian cocked the hammer. Last warning, Hale. Victor's eyes shifted between them, calculating. Then he laughed. That same soft, sad sound. This isn't over. You think marriage will protect her? Think I can't reach her even as your wife? He backed toward the window he'd entered through. I'll wait. Days, weeks, months if I have to. But eventually, Blackthorn, you'll slip. You'll let your guard down, and when you do... The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Victor jerked, his hand flying to his shoulder where blood bloomed through white fabric. He stared at Adrian, shock replacing calculation. You shot me. I warned you. Adrian kept the gun level. Guards! Footsteps thundered in the hallway. Victor looked at Clara one last time, something like regret crossing his features. You could have chosen me, he said quietly. Could have been magnificent together. Then he was gone, dropping through the window with the grace of someone who'd escaped tight spaces before. By the time the guards reached the room, only blood on the carpet remained. Adrian lowered the gun, his hand shaking slightly. Clara stood frozen, her mind blank with shock and adrenaline. Around them, servants appeared, asking questions, offering help. But all Clara could see was Victor's blood on the floor. All she could hear was his promise. This isn't over. And the terrible certainty that he was right. The constables arrived within the hour, summoned by Adrian's head of security. They found Clara wrapped in a blanket by the fire, still shaking, while Adrian gave his statement with the kind of cold precision that came from years of commanding rooms full of powerful men. He entered through the window, threatened Miss Whitmore. I discharged my weapon in defense of her person when he refused to surrender. Adrian's voice never wavered. The guards he incapacitated are receiving medical attention. I want him found and arrested before sunrise. The lead constable, a weathered man named Morrison, took notes with the careful neutrality of someone who knew he was dealing with territory politics above his pay grade. We'll need Miss Whitmore's account as well. Clara looked up, forcing her mind to focus. He was waiting in my room when I woke, said the guards were unconscious, grabbed me when I tried to escape. Duke Blackthorn arrived before he could... Her voice caught. Before he could do whatever he'd planned. And you're certain it was Victor Hale? I recognized his voice, his face. It was him. Morrison exchanged glances with his partner. We'll put out notices to all stations. Check the hospitals for shoulder wounds. But, Your Grace, he turned to Adrian, you should know that charging a man of Hale's standing will require substantial evidence. His word against yours and Miss Whitmore's might not be enough. Then find the guards he drugged. Get their testimony. Search his residence for whatever he used to climb to a second-story window. Adrian's jaw tightened. I don't care what it takes. I want him in custody. After the constables left, after the servants had been dismissed, and the broken porcelain cleared away, Adrian and Clara sat in silence. The fire burned low. Outside, the first hints of dawn touched the horizon. You shot him, Clara said finally. I did. You didn't hesitate. No. Adrian stared at his hands like they belonged to someone else. I saw him touching you, saw the fear in your eyes, and I didn't think, just acted. You could have killed him. I know, part of me wanted to. He looked at her then, something raw in his expression. Does that frighten you, knowing I'm capable of that? Clara thought about it, about the gunshot, the blood, the absolute certainty in Adrian's voice when he'd threatened Victor. She should have been frightened, should have seen it as another man trying to control her fate through violence. Instead, she felt only a bone-deep relief that someone had finally stood between her and the thing hunting her. No, she said, it doesn't frighten me. Maybe it should, but it doesn't. The wedding is in 8 hours. I know. We don't have to go through with it. Not after this. If you want to postpone to take time, Victor's still out there, still dangerous. Postponing doesn't change that. Clara pulled the blanket tighter. Unless you're the one who wants to back out. I'm not backing out. I just want to make sure you're choosing this clearly, not just running from one threat into another arrangement you're not ready for. I'm not ready for any of this, but that's never stopped me before. She met his eyes. I want to go through with the wedding. Want the protection it offers, want the chance to work on those reforms we keep talking about. And I want, she hesitated, I want to see what happens between us when we're not constantly dealing with crises. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Hope, maybe, or relief. Then we get married in 8 hours, and afterwards we make Victor Hale regret he ever learned your name. The ceremony was smaller than originally planned. Family and a handful of witnesses in the Blackthorn Manor's private chapel. Clara's mother cried throughout, though whether from joy or anxiety remained unclear. Edmund looked simultaneously relieved and guilty, like he couldn't quite believe his daughter's sacrifice was saving them all. Maggie stood as witness, her smile knowing and insufferably pleased. Clara wore a dress that had belonged to Adrian's mother, altered hastily to fit. It was simpler than she'd expected for a ducal wedding, cream silk without excessive embellishment, elegant rather than ostentatious. She caught her reflection in a window before entering the chapel and barely recognized herself. The woman staring back looked older, harder. Someone who'd survived things that should have broken her. Adrian waited at the altar in formal dress, his expression carefully controlled. But when Clara began her walk down the aisle, something cracked in that control. His eyes tracked her movement with an intensity that made her breath catch. The officiant spoke words she'd heard at a dozen weddings before, promises about honor and partnership, duty and devotion. Clara repeated them mechanically, very aware this was theater, a legal maneuver dressed up in ceremony. Adrian's hands were steady as he slid the ring onto her finger, gold, simple, surprisingly warm against her skin. I now pronounce you husband and wife. The kiss that sealed the marriage was brief, chaste, nothing that suggested actual feeling. But when Adrian pulled back, his thumb brushed her cheek in a gesture so gentle it hurt. Thank you, he murmured, too quiet for anyone else to hear. Clara didn't trust herself to respond. The breakfast that followed was subdued. Constable Morrison appeared midway through to report that Victor Hale had vanished. No trace at his residence, no reports from hospitals or doctors, no sightings despite citywide notices. The wounded man had disappeared like smoke. We'll keep searching, Morrison assured them, but without knowing where he went. He's still in the territory, Clara said. Everyone turned to look at her. He won't run. His entire fortune is tied up in properties and investments here. Plus, running would be admitting guilt. Victor's too arrogant for that. Then where is he? Edmund asked. Somewhere he feels safe, somewhere he can watch and plan. She looked at Adrian. He'll wait for an opening, for me to be vulnerable. Then he'll try again. Not if we find him first, Adrian said. But Clara heard the doubt beneath his certainty. The territory was vast, full of places a man with resources could hide. And Victor had proven himself adept at existing in spaces between the law's reach. They were married now, legally bound, theoretically protected. But protection only worked if the threat could be contained. And Victor Hale was anything but contained. The week after the wedding, Clara threw herself into work. Adrian had been serious about the oversight committee, real authority, real resources, and a mandate to investigate implementation failures in the land reform program. Clara attended her first meeting 3 days after becoming a duchess. and the shock on the other members' faces when she walked in was almost worth the preceding chaos. Thomas Chen recovered first, rising to shake her hand. Your Grace, congratulations on your marriage. The title still felt strange. Thank you. And please, call me Clara. I'm here as a committee member, not a duchess. Good luck separating those identities, Ruth Castellano said dryly. Everything you say now carries ducal weight whether you want it to or not. She was right. Clara noticed it immediately, the way people deferred to her opinions, the careful phrasing designed not to offend. Even when she was clearly wrong about something, the pushback was gentler than it would have been before. It was infuriating. If anyone in this room censors themselves because of who I married, we've already failed, Clara said bluntly at the start of their second meeting. I don't want deference. I want honest disagreement. Argue with me. Tell me when I'm wrong. That's the only way this works. Sarah Marks, the territorial representative, smiled. You really are as direct as people say. I don't have time for anything else. There are families being displaced while we're sitting here being polite. Clara spread the documentation she'd compiled across the table. I've been reviewing assessment records from the past 6 months. The discrepancies are worse than we thought. Fair market valuations are being systematically undercut by 20 to 40%, and the appeals process is essentially theater. Of the 300 families who've filed complaints, exactly 4 have won adjustments. The room went quiet as the others examined her findings. Thomas whistled low. This is damning. If we present this to the territorial legislature, they'll bury it, Sarah interrupted. Half the legislators have financial interests in the consolidation firms. They're not going to regulate themselves out of profit. Then we go public, Clara said. Release the findings to newspapers. Force accountability through public pressure instead of official channels. That would destroy your husband's political capital, Ruth pointed out. He's been the face of these reforms. Admitting they're failing this badly makes him look incompetent or complicit. Clara had already considered this, already wrestled with the conflict between loyalty to Adrian and commitment to the work. But she'd made her choice before ever agreeing to join this committee. Adrian knew what he was getting when he married me. He wants actual reform, not the appearance of it. If his reputation takes damage in the service of fixing a broken system, he'll accept that. She hoped that was true. Besides, we can frame it as evidence the Oversight Committee is working, that we're identifying and correcting failures. That takes courage, not incompetence. Thomas leaned back, reassessing her. You've thought this through. I've thought about little else for the past week. We have documentation, we have clear patterns of abuse, and we have the authority to demand changes. The question is whether we have the courage to actually use that authority. The vote was unanimous. They would compile the findings into a comprehensive report, release it to major newspapers simultaneously to prevent suppression, and demand immediate reforms to the assessment and appeals processes. It was the kind of bold move that would make enemies, powerful ones. But Clara had stopped caring about making enemies the moment Victor Hale had bought her family's debt. She just hadn't expected Adrian's reaction when she told him. You're going to destroy me, he said quietly. They were in his study, their study now, technically, though Clara still felt like a guest in most of the manner. Every political ally I have will see this as betrayal, proof I can't control my own committee, my own wife. I'm not trying to destroy you, I'm trying to fix the system you claim to care about fixing. By publicly humiliating me? By doing exactly what you asked me to do when you formed this committee. You said you wanted real reform. This is what that looks like. Clara refused to back down, even as her stomach churned. If you wanted me to protect your reputation instead of pursuing the truth, you married the wrong woman. Adrian turned away, staring into the fire. For a long moment, he said nothing. Clara braced herself for anger, for demands that she reconsider. Instead, when he spoke, his voice was tired. You're right. I did ask for this. Asked for someone who wouldn't pull punches or prioritize politics over outcomes. He faced her again. I just didn't expect it to hurt quite this much when you followed through. I'm not trying to hurt you. I know. That almost makes it worse. He moved to the cabinet, poured 2 glasses of whiskey, and handed her one. Release the report. I'll support the findings publicly, take responsibility for the implementation failures, and demand immediate corrections. It'll cost me politically, but you're right. It's the right thing to do. Relief and guilt twisted together in Clara's chest. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm just trying to keep up with my own wife's integrity. He raised his glass. To uncomfortable truths and the people brave enough to speak them. They drank. The whiskey burned, but it steadied her. Victor still hasn't been found, Adrian said, changing subjects. It's been a week. Morrison thinks he might have actually fled the territory. He hasn't. How can you be sure? Because I know him. Know how he thinks. Clara set down her glass. He sees this as a challenge now, a game he intends to win. Running would be admitting defeat. He won't do that. Then what will he do? Wait for me to make a mistake. To be somewhere he can reach me without witnesses or guards. She met Adrian's eyes. Which is why I need you to stop trying to keep me locked up like precious china. I'm not. You are. Every time I want to visit my family or attend a public function, there's a reason why it's too dangerous, too risky. I understand you're trying to protect me, but I can't live like a prisoner in my own marriage. Adrian's jaw tightened. He broke into a secured manner and assaulted you. Forgive me for taking that seriously. I take it seriously too. But I refuse to let fear control my life. That's exactly what Victor wants, to make me small, to make me hide. I won't give him that satisfaction. So what do you suggest? We just pretend he's not out there plotting your murder? No. We set a trap. The idea had been forming for days, sharpening with each hour Victor remained at large. We announce I'm attending a public function, somewhere with crowds, witnesses, plenty of visibility. We make sure word reaches Victor that I'll be there, vulnerable, accessible. Then we wait for him to make his move. Absolutely not. You're talking about using yourself as bait. I'm talking about taking control of the situation instead of cowering in corners, waiting for him to strike on his terms. Clara stood, pacing. He's watching us, waiting for an opening, so we give him one. One we control, where we're ready, where law enforcement is positioned to catch him in the act. And if something goes wrong, if he gets to you before the constables can intervene, then you'll be there to stop him, like you did before. She stopped in front of him. I trust you, Adrian. Trust you to keep me safe while we end this, but I need you to trust me too. Trust that I know what I'm doing. He studied her, conflict clear in his expression. Finally, he sighed. You're the most frustrating woman I've ever met. I know. And the bravest, and probably the stupidest for suggesting this plan. But he was already thinking, she could see it, working through logistics. There's a territorial assembly next month, major social event, hundreds of attendees. If we announce you'll be speaking about the committee's findings, Victor won't be able to resist. I'll be publicly challenging the system he exploits, drawing attention to myself, being exactly the kind of target he can't ignore. While we have every constable in the territory watching for him, Adrian moved to his desk, already drafting the announcement. This is insane. Probably, but it's better than hiding. He looked up, something almost like admiration in his eyes. How did I end up married to someone who makes me look like a coward by comparison? You're not a coward. You're just used to solving problems with money and influence instead of direct confrontation. And you're used to direct confrontation even when it might get you killed. He returned to writing. We're doing this your way. But Clara, if anything goes wrong, if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments, no heroics. Agreed? Agreed. She was lying, and they both knew it. But Adrian seemed to accept the fiction, probably because he was planning his own contingencies that didn't involve trusting her to follow orders. They were quite a pair, two people trying to protect each other while refusing to admit they cared enough to be vulnerable. The report went public 3 days later, released simultaneously to 5 major newspapers with Clara's name listed as primary author. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Headlines screamed about systematic corruption, about displaced families cheated of their rightful compensation, about oversight committees finally doing their jobs. The backlash was equally swift. Legislators denounced the findings as exaggerated, politically motivated, an attack on legitimate business practices. The assessment companies threatened lawsuits. Clara received 3 anonymous letters promising various forms of violence if she didn't retract her statements. Adrian weathered the storm with the grim determination of someone who'd expected exactly this. He gave interviews supporting the committee's findings, announced new regulations for the assessment process, and personally met with displaced families to hear their stories. His approval ratings tanked among the wealthy elite who'd supported him. But something else happened too. Common people, farmers, workers, Families who'd been silenced by systems designed to ignore them started showing up at committee meetings, started sharing their stories, started believing that maybe, possibly, someone actually cared about their suffering. "You've started something," Ruth told Clara after a particularly crowded public hearing, "something bigger than just policy reform. You've given people hope that the system can change." Clara wasn't sure hope was enough, but it was a start. The Territorial Assembly was scheduled for 3 weeks from the report's release. Adrian had insisted on that timeline, enough time for security arrangements, for Victor to learn about the event and plan his approach, but not so long that momentum from the report's publicity faded. The assembly would be held in the Territorial Capitol building, a grand structure built to impress foreign visitors and intimidate local citizens. Clara had been there once before for a minor function. Now she was scheduled to address the full assembly about the committee's findings and recommendations. Constable Morrison coordinated security with the kind of thoroughness that suggested he took Victor's threat very seriously. Plainclothes officers would be positioned throughout the building, every entrance monitored, attendees screened for weapons. Adrian himself would be on the stage beside Clara, armed and watching. "If Hale shows his face, we'll have him," Morrison promised. "But, Your Grace," he addressed Clara with the uncomfortable formality everyone seemed determined to use now. "You should know that men like Hale don't always confront directly. Poison, accidents, hired violence, these are tools he's used before. So I should be afraid of everything and everyone. You should be cautious. There's a difference." The night before the assembly, Clara couldn't sleep. She paced their bedroom. They'd been sharing a room for appearance's sake, though Adrian still insisted on taking the chaise lounge while Clara used the bed. It was ridiculous, this careful distance they maintained while legally bound to each other. "You should try to rest," Adrian said from his makeshift bed. "Tomorrow will be exhausting. I can't stop thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. That makes 2 of us." He sat up, rubbing his face. "It's not too late to cancel. We could postpone, wait until Victor's actually been found." "No, we've committed to this. I've committed to this." Clara stopped pacing, turning to face him. "I need to ask you something. Anything. Why did you really marry me? And don't say strategy or protection or committee work. Tell me the truth." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. The firelight cast shadows across his face, making him look younger, less certain. "Because the first time I met you, you looked at me like I was just a man," he said finally. "Not a duke, not a fortune, not a title. Just a person who happened to be wrong about something important. Do you know how rare that is? People have been treating me like a thing to be managed or exploited since I inherited at 23. But you argued with me like I was worth arguing with, like my opinions mattered enough to change." He stood, moving closer. "Then Victor threatened you, and I realized I couldn't stand the thought of you being hurt. Couldn't tolerate the idea of someone like him owning someone like you. So I did the only thing I could think of that gave me the right to protect you. I married you." "That's not protection. That's—" Clara struggled for the word. "Selfishness? Probably. I wanted you safe, but I also wanted you close. Wanted the right to stand beside you when you challenged rooms full of powerful men. Wanted to see what would happen if I gave someone brilliant the resources to actually change things, instead of just complaining about them." His voice dropped. "Wanted to see if you'd ever look at me the way I'd started looking at you." The admission hung between them, heavy with implications. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. "How do you look at me? Like you're the most dangerous, infuriating, magnificent thing I've ever encountered. Like watching you work is better than anything else I could be doing. Like I'd shoot Victor Hale 100 more times if it meant keeping you safe." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her face. "Like I've fallen for my own wife, and I don't know what to do about it." Clara's breath caught. She should step back. Should maintain the careful distance they'd established. Should remember this marriage was supposed to be strategic, temporary, a legal shield against threats. Instead, she kissed him. Adrian made a sound somewhere between surprise and relief, his arms coming around her like he'd been waiting for permission. The kiss was nothing like the chaste formality of their wedding. This was heat and hunger, weeks of tension finally released. Clara's fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, and Adrian responded by lifting her completely off the ground. They broke apart, breathing hard, Adrian's forehead resting against hers. "We should stop," he said, not moving. "Probably. This complicates everything. I know. I don't want to stop. Neither do I. So they didn't. And for a few hours, the threat of Victor Hale and the weight of tomorrow's assembly and all the complicated politics of their situation faded into insignificance. There was only this, two people who'd found each other in the middle of chaos, choosing to be reckless together. Later, wrapped in blankets with Adrian's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, Clara let herself believe they might actually survive this, that the trap they'd set would work, that Victor would finally be caught, and they could build something real from this marriage of convenience. She should have known better than to hope. The Territorial Assembly Hall was packed by the time they arrived. Clara wore deep blue, Adrian's ducal colors, making a statement about unity and power. Photographers captured their entrance, the Duke and his controversial new wife walking into the lion's den together. Clara could feel eyes on her from every direction, some curious, some hostile, some openly admiring. She scanned the crowd for Victor's face, knowing he wouldn't be stupid enough to appear openly, but unable to stop herself from looking. Morrison caught her eye from his position near the main doors, giving a subtle nod. Security in place, officers positioned, everything ready. The session began with tedious formalities, introductions, procedural votes, meaningless speeches from legislators protecting their interests. Clara sat through it with forced patience, her prepared remarks burning in her pocket. Finally, the Assembly chairman called her name. Duchess Clara Blackthorne, representing the Reform Oversight Committee. She stood, very aware of Adrian's hand briefly touching hers before she left their seats. The walk to the podium felt endless, every step measured. Behind the crowd, through the high windows, she could see storm clouds gathering. Appropriate. Clara reached the podium, pulled out her notes, and looked out at hundreds of faces waiting to judge her. Members of the Territorial Assembly, honored guests, citizens of this territory, I stand before you today not as a duchess, but as someone who believes our systems can and must do better. Her voice carried clearly, steady despite her racing heart. The Reform Oversight Committee was established to identify and correct failures in our land consolidation policies. What we found is not just failure, it's systematic exploitation disguised as progress. She laid out the findings methodically, the false assessments, the rigged appeals, the families destroyed while profits soared. With each piece of evidence, she felt the room's energy shift. Some faces hardened in defensive anger, others showed shock, like they genuinely hadn't known. A few reflected the grief of people who'd experienced exactly what she described. The question before us is simple, Clara continued. Do we have the courage to admit we were wrong and fix it? Or do we protect the powerful at the expense of everyone else? Movement caught her eye. Someone in the balcony, shifting position too quickly. Clara's speech faltered mid-sentence as she recognized the silhouette. Victor. He stood in the shadows of the upper gallery, one hand hidden in his coat. Their eyes met across the distance, and he smiled, that cold, possessive smile she'd seen before. Then everything happened at once. Victor's hand emerged holding something dark and metallic. Adrian shouted her name, lunging from his seat. Morrison and 3 other officers converged on the balcony stairs. Clara froze at the podium, watching Victor's arm rise, watching him aim. The gunshot was shockingly loud in the enclosed space. But Victor wasn't shooting at Clara. He was shooting at Adrian, who'd put himself between them, who'd thrown himself into the bullet's path without hesitation. Adrian went down hard, blood spreading across his shoulder. The assembly erupted into chaos, screaming, people diving for cover, constables shouting orders. Clara ran to Adrian's side, her hands pressing against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding while her mind went blank with terror. Get down! Morrison was there, pulling her behind a barrier as more shots rang out. Not from Victor, from the officers returning fire. Clara heard a cry, a heavy thud, then silence. Adrian, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the blood on her hands. Someone help him! Medical team's coming. Stay down. Morrison's face was grim. Hale's been hit. He's down. It's over. But it didn't feel over. It felt like the world was ending as Adrian's blood soaked through Clara's dress, as his eyes fought to stay focused on her face. Told you, he managed, his voice weak. Told you I'd stop him. You're an idiot, Clara said, tears streaming down her face. A stupid, heroic idiot? At least I'm your idiot. The medical team arrived, efficient hands taking over the pressure on his wound. They loaded Adrian onto a stretcher, barking orders about blood loss and surgery. Clara tried to follow, but Morrison held her back. Let them work. He's in good hands. He took a bullet for me. I know. But you need to stay calm. Let the doctors do their job. Morrison's expression softened. He's strong. The shot missed anything vital. He'll be fine. Clara wanted to believe him, needed to believe him, but all she could see was Adrian collapsing, choosing to put himself in danger to protect her, proving with his own blood that everything he'd said last night was true. In the balcony, constables were hauling Victor's body away. Clara glimpsed his face as they passed, eyes open but unseeing, blood staining his expensive shirt. The man who'd terrorized her for weeks, reduced to a corpse being carried out like trash. She should have felt relief, vindication, something other than this hollow numbness. The assembly is adjourned, the chairman was announcing, his voice shaking. Medical teams, please assist any injured parties. Everyone else, please evacuate in an orderly fashion. But Clara wasn't listening. She was already running toward the exit where they'd taken Adrian, her heart pounding the same desperate rhythm. Please be okay. Please be okay. Please. Because she'd just realized something crucial, something that changed everything. She'd fallen for him too. Completely, irrevocably, stupidly in love with the man who'd married her to keep her safe and ended up taking a bullet to prove it. And if he died before she could tell him, she'd never forgive herself. The surgery took 4 hours. 4 hours of Clara pacing the hospital corridor while her family tried and failed to comfort her. Her mother brought tea she didn't drink. Maggie held her hand until Clara's grip became painful and had to let go. Edmund stood by the window, looking older than Clara had ever seen him. He'll be fine, Beatrice kept saying. He's strong. He'll be fine. But the words rang hollow in the sterile silence. When the surgeon finally emerged, still in blood-stained scrubs, Clara's heart stopped. The bullet passed clean through, Dr. Hammond said, pulling down his mask. Missed the major vessels by less than an inch. He's lucky. Extraordinarily lucky. He looked at Clara, his expression gentle. He's asking for you. Clara didn't remember moving, didn't remember the walk down the hall or the nurse opening the door. She only remembered seeing Adrian propped up in the hospital bed, his shoulder bandaged and his face pale but alive, so blessedly alive. You look terrible, he said, his voice rough. A laugh escaped her, half sob. You got shot and you're criticizing my appearance? Someone has to maintain standards around here. He tried to shift, winced. Come here. Clara crossed to the bed, carefully taking his uninjured hand. You're an idiot. So you said, right before you called me heroic. I'm choosing to focus on that part. Adrian, her voice broke. You could have died. You threw yourself in front of a gun for me. Of course I did. What else was I supposed to do? Let you get shot? He squeezed her hand. That was never an option, Clara. Not for a second. Why? Because I love you, you brilliant, infuriating woman. I've loved you since you stood up in my gathering and told me I was wrong in front of everyone who mattered. Maybe before that, the moment you looked at me like I was just a man making mistakes instead of a duke who couldn't possibly err. His eyes were clear despite the pain medication. I married you to protect you, yes, but I stayed married to you. Stayed invested in every argument and fight and moment of stubborn defiance, because you made me remember what it felt like to actually care about something, someone. Tears streamed down Clara's face, messy and unchecked. I love you too. I didn't want to. Tried not to. Told myself this was just strategy and survival. But somewhere between arguing about policy and watching you choose principle over politics, I fell completely. Good. Adrian pulled her closer with his good arm. Because I have no intention of letting you dissolve this marriage now. You're stuck with me. Even though I'm difficult and argumentative and likely to keep causing political chaos? Especially because of that. He kissed her forehead. Though maybe we could go a few months without someone trying to kill us. That would be nice. I'll see what I can do. They stayed like that, forehead to forehead, until a nurse appeared to shoo Clara out so Adrian could rest. But before she left, he caught her hand again. Victor's dead. Morrison confirmed it. He died at the scene. Adrian's expression was complicated. Not quite relief. Not quite regret. It's over. Truly over. Clara thought about Victor's final moments, about the obsession that had driven him to such desperate lengths. Part of her felt the weight of that death, the waste of it. But mostly, she felt free. It's over, she agreed. The investigation into Victor Hale's death revealed more than anyone expected. Constable Morrison and his team searched Victor's properties, finding documentation that connected him to 3 murders and 2 disappearances across the Southern Territories. Catherine Marsh's name appeared in ledgers alongside notations that made Clara sick to read. There were others too, business partners who'd refused deals, women who'd rejected advances, anyone who'd stood between Victor and what he wanted. The newspapers that had excoriated Clara weeks earlier now praised her courage. Duchess survives assassination attempt by notorious criminal, ran one headline. Reform advocate proves herself under fire, proclaimed another. The narrative shifted overnight from controversial troublemaker to brave survivor. Clara hated it, hated the way tragedy was being repackaged as triumph, death transformed into political capital. Let them write their stories, Adrian said when she complained during one of her visits to his hospital room. He was recovering quickly, already demanding to be released despite doctors' orders. What matters is what we do next, the work that still needs doing. The work. Clara settled into the chair beside his bed. The Assembly voted unanimously to implement our committee's recommendations. Every single reform we proposed, approved without opposition. They're calling it the Blackthorne-Whitmore reforms. As they should. You did most of the actual work. Adrian shifted, wincing. What's wrong? You should be celebrating. I am, I think. It's just... Clara struggled to articulate the unease. They're only supporting reforms because I nearly died. Because you got shot protecting me. We made martyrs of ourselves, and suddenly everyone cares about displaced families. What happens when the sympathy fades? When we're no longer tragic figures and just people doing difficult work? Then we keep doing the work anyway. Use the political capital while we have it. Build structures that outlast the moment. He reached for her hand. You wanted to change things, Clara. This is what change looks like. Messy, incomplete, compromised by the very circumstances that made it possible. But still change. Still better than what came before. He was right. She knew he was right. But accepting victory felt premature when so much remained broken. I want to visit the displaced families, she said, the ones who filed complaints that were ignored. I want to tell them personally that their appeals are being reviewed, that assessments are being recalculated, that we're trying to make this right. Then do it. You're a duchess now. Use that power for something good. I'm using your power, your title, your money, your influence. No. Adrian's grip tightened. You're using our power. This marriage made us partners. Everything I have is yours, and that includes the ability to make territorial policy actually work for people who need it. He pulled her closer. Stop diminishing yourself. You earned this position through intelligence and courage, not through my title. Own it. Clara kissed him, careful of his injuries, trying to convey gratitude and love and apology all at once. When they broke apart, Adrian was smiling. Also, the doctors are releasing me tomorrow, which means you're stuck cohabitating with a man who's going to be insufferably needy while he recovers. I think I can manage. Can you? I'm told I'm a terrible patient, demanding, impatient, prone to ignoring medical advice, so exactly like your normal self, but with a legitimate excuse. He laughed, then grimaced. Don't make me laugh. It hurts. Then stop being amusing. Impossible. It's part of my charm. This was what Clara had found in the middle of chaos. Not rescue, not protection, but partnership. Someone who challenged her as much as she challenged him, who trusted her judgment while offering his own, who'd literally taken a bullet but still treated her like an equal. She'd been so afraid of being owned that she'd almost missed the difference between possession and love. The tour of displaced families took 3 weeks. Clara and Adrian, against his doctor's strenuous objections, visited over 40 households, listening to stories of loss and frustration. They brought more than sympathy. They brought revised assessment documents, checks for the difference between what families had been paid and what they were actually owed, and personal apologies for a system that had failed them. The reactions varied. Some families were grateful to the point of tears. Others were angry, pointing out that money couldn't restore lost homes or repair fractured communities. A few refused to see them at all, viewing the Blackthorns as part of the problem regardless of current reforms. Clara didn't blame them. Wouldn't have accepted easy forgiveness if their positions were reversed. At one farmhouse, a woman named Ellen Pritchard invited them inside with obvious reluctance. Her husband had died 6 months earlier. Heart attack brought on by stress, she said, from fighting assessment companies and losing. She'd been forced to relocate with 4 children to a cramped urban apartment. "You want me to thank you?" Ellen's voice was bitter as she served tea neither Clara nor Adrian touched. "To accept your money and pretend it fixes what you people destroyed?" "No," Clara said. "I don't want thanks. I want you to know that what happened to you was wrong, that the system that allowed it was wrong, and that we're trying, inadequately, imperfectly, to prevent it from happening to others. Trying isn't enough. My husband is dead. My children are growing up in a neighborhood where they're not safe, in a building that's falling apart, away from everything they knew. Your money doesn't change that." "You're right, it doesn't." Adrian set an envelope on the table. "This is the recalculated value of your property plus compensation for emotional damages. It's more than what the law requires. It's still not enough. It can never be enough. But it's what we can offer." Ellen stared at the envelope like it might bite her. "Why? Why are you doing this?" "Because your husband deserved better. Your children deserve better. And because someone needs to acknowledge that efficiency and progress aren't worth what they cost when measured in human suffering." Clara met the older woman's eyes. "I can't bring him back. Can't undo what's been done. But I can try to ensure your children have opportunities he would have wanted for them. That's all I'm offering, a chance to rebuild on your terms." Ellen opened the envelope, her hands shaking as she read the amount. This is 3 times what they originally paid us. It's what the land was actually worth, plus 3 years of lost income and relocation costs." Adrian's voice was gentle. "We can't force you to accept it, but it's yours regardless of whether you forgive us or not." The woman broke down sobbing. Clara moved to comfort her, and Ellen grabbed her hands with a grip that hurt. "I hated you," she whispered. "Hated what you represented. Hated that people like you got to decide people like us didn't matter." "I know, I'm sorry. But you came here. You listened. You're trying." Ellen's tears soaked into Clara's sleeve. "That's more than anyone else has done." When they left an hour later, Clara felt hollowed out and refilled with something heavier than she'd carried before. Responsibility. Not just for fixing policy, but for the weight of individual lives broken by that policy. "This is going to destroy you if you let it," Adrian said quietly in the carriage. "You can't carry every person's pain personally." "Can't I? We created this pain. We, the aristocracy, the wealthy, the powerful, we built systems that grind people down and called it progress. Someone needs to feel the cost of that, needs to remember these aren't statistics in reports, but actual human beings." "I know, but Clara," he turned her face toward him, "you can't save everyone, can't undo every wrong. You'll burn yourself out trying. Then I burn out. At least I'll have tried." He kissed her softly, sadly. "You're going to change the world, and it's going to hurt every step of the way. I just want you to know I'll be there, for all of it. The victories and the losses, and the moments that feel like both at once. Promise?" "Promise." The territorial legislature convened 6 weeks after Victor's death to formally adopt the reform package. Clara attended with Adrian at her side, his arm still in a sling, but his presence commanding as ever. The chamber was packed with observers, displaced families, journalists, reformers who'd been fighting these battles for years. When Clara was called to speak, she felt the weight of all those eyes, all those hopes. "I stand before you today, not as someone who has all the answers, but as someone who's learned what happens when we prioritize efficiency over humanity. The reforms we're implementing today are a start. Only a start. They address assessment processes, appeals mechanisms, relocation support, but they don't undo harm already done. They don't restore communities already destroyed." Clara's voice strengthened. "What they do is acknowledge we were wrong, that our original approach valued profit over people, and that we're committed to doing better going forward." She outlined the specific reforms: independent assessment boards with no financial stake in outcomes, mandatory support for displaced families, including housing assistance and job training, penalties for companies that deliberately undervalued properties. Each provision had been hard-fought, negotiated through committees and political compromises that left everyone slightly dissatisfied, which meant it was probably close to right. These reforms won't satisfy everyone, Clara continued. They're too aggressive for those who profit from the old system, too timid for those who've suffered under it. But they represent something important, a government willing to admit mistakes and correct them, a system that can learn, adapt, improve. The vote was overwhelming. 123 in favor, 12 opposed, 5 abstentions. The Blackthorn Whitmore reforms passed into law with applause that shook the chamber. Clara descended from the podium to find Adrian waiting, pride written clearly on his face. "You did it," he said. "We did it. No, this was you. Your vision, your courage, your refusal to accept that wrong things couldn't be made right." He kissed her forehead. "I just provided the platform and the last name. And the political capital, and the funding, and the shield against people who wanted me silenced." Details. But he was smiling. Ruth Castellano appeared, followed by Thomas Chen and Sarah Marks. The other committee members who'd fought alongside Clara through endless meetings and political battles. "Congratulations," Ruth said, embracing Clara. "You've just rewritten how this territory approaches land policy. Do you know how rare that is? How difficult? I know it's incomplete. That there's still so much work. There's always more work. That's not failure. That's the nature of systemic change." Thomas shook Adrian's hand carefully, mindful of the injury. "You both should be proud. You took an unjust system and forced it to bend toward justice. Not perfectly, but measurably." "What happens next?" Sarah asked. "Now that the reforms are law, how do we ensure implementation actually matches intent?" "We keep watching," Clara said. "Keep investigating, keep publishing findings, keep holding people accountable. The committee doesn't dissolve just because we won one legislative battle." "Spoken like someone who's forgotten what rest looks like," Adrian murmured. "I'll rest when—" Clara stopped, laughing at herself. "I was about to say I'll rest when the work is done. But the work's never done, is it?" "No. Which is why you have to pace yourself. Build sustainability instead of burning bright and fast." Adrian's hand found hers. "We're in this for the long term now. Years, decades maybe. That requires different strategies than crisis management." He was right. They'd been running on adrenaline and urgency for so long that Clara had forgotten how to think beyond the next crisis. But Victor was dead. The immediate threats had passed. What remained was the harder, slower work of actually building something that lasted. "Then we build sustainability," Clara agreed. "We create structures that outlast us, train others to continue the work when we're gone, make reform a permanent feature instead of a temporary adjustment." "Now you're thinking like a true revolutionary," Ruth said, grinning. "I prefer persistent irritant," Clara replied. "Revolutions burn out. Irritants just keep itching." The celebration that night at Blackthorn Manor was small but genuine. Clara's family attended, Beatrice slightly drunk on champagne and pride, Edmund looking 10 years younger without the weight of debt crushing him, Maggie charming everyone within earshot. The committee members came, along with a few displaced families who'd become vocal advocates for the reforms. Clara watched Adrian work the room despite his injury, ensuring everyone felt welcome, that conversations flowed. He was good at this. The social architecture that made disparate people feel united in common purpose. She'd seen him use those skills to manipulate and control. Now she watched him use them to build community. "You're staring," Maggie said, appearing at Clara's elbow with fresh champagne. "I'm appreciating." "Is that what we're calling it?" Her sister's eyes danced. "You look at him like he hung the moon. It's disgustingly romantic. We survived an assassination attempt and passed landmark legislation. I think I'm allowed some romance." "You're allowed whatever you want. You're a duchess who changed territorial policy through sheer stubbornness. The rules don't really apply to you anymore." Maggie's smile softened. "I'm happy for you, truly. You deserve this. All of it." "So do you, and we're going to make sure you get it." Clara squeezed her sister's hand. "No more desperate marriage hunts. No more sacrificing yourself for family stability. You get to choose your own path now. Because you married well. Because we're finally free of the debt that was controlling all our choices. And because I'm going to use every bit of influence I have to make sure you have options I never did." Maggie hugged her, fierce and tight. "You're the best sister in the history of sisters." I know. Try to remember that when I'm being insufferable about your choices. Later, when the guests had departed and the servants were clearing the last of the celebration, Clara found Adrian in their bedroom. He was struggling with his shirt buttons one-handed, frustration evident. Let me. Clara crossed to him, carefully undoing the buttons. You're not supposed to be using that arm yet. Dr. Hammond is overly cautious. I'm fine. You were shot 6 weeks ago. You're not fine. You're healing. She eased the shirt off his shoulders, mindful of the bandages. The wound was closing well, but the scar would be permanent, a reminder of the moment he'd chosen her over his own safety. Does it bother you? Adrian asked quietly. Looking at it? No. It reminds me that you're real, that this, us, is real. Clara traced the edge of the bandage gently. I spent so long convinced that trusting people would destroy me, that letting anyone close was weakness. And then you came along and proved that wrong by being exactly the kind of stubborn, principled, ridiculous man I couldn't help falling for. Ridiculous? You took a bullet for me. That's objectively ridiculous. It's objectively love. He pulled her closer with his good arm. And I'd do it again. Every time without hesitation. Let's not test that theory. Once was enough. Clara kissed him, soft and thorough. I love you, not because you saved me, not because you gave me power or platform or protection, but because you saw me, really saw me, and chose to stand beside me instead of trying to manage or change me. You're ungovernable. Managing you would be impossible. Damn right. They moved to the bed, careful of Adrian's shoulder, finding comfort in closeness. Outside, the storm that had been threatening all day finally broke. Rain lashed the windows, thunder rolling across the territory. What do you think happens now? Clara asked into the darkness. Now we do the work. Implement reforms, monitor results, adjust when things don't work as planned. Build the boring, essential infrastructure of lasting change. That's not very romantic. No, but it's honest. Adrian's fingers traced patterns on her arm. We also live our lives, have arguments and reconciliations. Figure out how to be married when we're not in constant crisis. Maybe have children if we want them, or don't if we prefer to focus on the work. We get to choose, Clara. That's what we fought for, the ability to choose our own path instead of having it dictated by circumstance or threat. I like that future. Good, because you're stuck with it, stuck with me. Best decision I ever made, Clara murmured, already half asleep. Even better than publicly challenging a duke? That led to you. So yes, definitely better. She felt him smile against her hair. I love you, Duchess Blackthorn. I love you too, even when you're being insufferable. Especially then. The rain continued through the night, washing away the last remnants of the past month's violence and fear. When Clara woke the next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows. Adrian was already awake, sitting up despite doctor's orders, reading through committee reports. You're supposed to be resting, Clara said. I'm reading. That's practically resting. That's work. It's interesting work. There's a difference. He showed her the report. New applications for appeals have tripled since the reforms passed. People who'd given up are trying again. That's because of you. Because of us. If you insist. But he was smiling. The committee meets next week. Ruth wants to discuss expanding the oversight mandate to include labor practices in consolidated operations. Apparently conditions in some of the larger farms are— Oh, Adrian. What? It's 6 in the morning. We passed landmark legislation yesterday. Can we have one morning where we don't immediately dive into the next crisis? He considered this. I suppose that's reasonable. Thank you. We could dive into other activities instead. Clara laughed, pulling him back down. You're injured. I'm functional. There's a difference. You're impossible. You love me anyway. I really do. She kissed him, morning breath and all. Against all logic and self-preservation, I love you completely. Good. Because I have plans for us. Long-term plans that require you to stay in love with me for at least the next 60 years. 60 years? I'm an optimist, and I take excellent care of myself. Mostly. You got shot. Once. That hardly counts as a pattern. They spent the morning in bed, talking and dozing and occasionally arguing about policy until Clara threw a pillow at him and demanded they discuss literally anything else. Eventually, hunger drove them downstairs where the household was already in motion, servants preparing for the day, groundskeepers tending the gardens that had somehow become more beautiful since Clara started living here. Or maybe she just started noticing beauty again instead of constantly bracing for the next disaster. Beatrice and Edmund visited that afternoon, bringing news that the estate had finally been fully cleared of debt, not just through Adrian's assistance, but through their own successful negotiations with creditors, now that the threat of immediate foreclosure had passed. "We're starting fresh," Edmund said, looking more alive than Clara had seen him in years. "No more desperate measures. No more sacrificing our daughter's happiness for financial survival." "Speaking of which," Beatrice added, "Maggie has 3 legitimate suitors now. Young men who actually seem interested in her rather than our social connections. It's refreshing." "She can take her time choosing," Clara said firmly. "Or not choose at all if she prefers. There's no pressure anymore. Thanks to you." Beatrice hugged her daughter. "I know I was hard on you, pushed you toward marriages you didn't want, criticized your choices. I was afraid, terrified of losing everything, of watching my children suffer for my husband's mistakes. But you found a better way, a braver way. I just refused to accept the options I was given. That's called courage, dear. Own it." After her parents left, Clara walked the grounds with Adrian. His shoulder was healing well enough for short excursions, though he still tired easily. They ended up at the old fountain, the one where Adrian had proposed his strategic marriage. "Hard to believe that was only 3 months ago," Clara said. "Feels like years, feels like yesterday. Time gets strange in crisis." "Are we still in crisis?" "No. I think we're finally in something else, something better." Adrian pulled her close, mindful of his healing shoulder. "We're in the part where we actually get to live instead of just survive." "I'm not sure I remember how to do that." "Then we'll figure it out together, like everything else." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the territory they were trying to change, one policy at a time. Somewhere in the city, families were receiving reassessment notices. Workers were organizing under new labor protections. Children of displaced farmers were starting to rebuild lives with resources that actually gave them choices. It wasn't perfect, would never be perfect, but it was better. Measurably, demonstrably better. And that was enough. A year later, Clara stood before another territorial assembly. This time, she wasn't defending reforms but expanding them. The committee's work had proven so effective that the legislature had voted to extend oversight to labor practices, environmental protections, and corporate accountability. The woman who'd once been called unfit for polite society was now shaping territorial policy at the highest levels. And she'd done it not by becoming acceptable, but by refusing to compromise on principles that mattered. Adrian watched from the gallery, still her fiercest supporter and most persistent critic. They argued constantly about methods, about priorities, about whether Clara was taking on too much too fast. But they were arguments born of love and respect, not power struggles. After the session, they walked home through streets that had become familiar. People recognized them now, some with gratitude, some with lingering resentment, most with simple acknowledgement that they existed and mattered. "Do you ever miss it?" Adrian asked. "The simplicity of before, when you could just be angry without having to actually fix things." "Never. Anger is exhausting without purpose. This," Clara gestured at the city around them, "this gives meaning to the rage, transforms it into something useful. You've become quite philosophical." "I've become old. There's a difference." "You're 27. "Yes, but I've lived enough chaos for several lifetimes. I'm allowed to feel ancient." They reached the manor as evening fell, the windows glowing with warm light. Home. It had taken Clara months to think of it that way, to stop feeling like a guest in Adrian's house. But somewhere between the fights and the reforms and the quiet mornings in bed, it had transformed into theirs. Inside, Maggie was waiting with news. She'd decided to enroll in the territorial university to study law. "Someone needs to understand how these systems actually work," she explained, "and I figure I might as well make myself useful while I'm being charming." "You'll be brilliant," Clara said, hugging her sister. "You'll also be insufferable with all that legal knowledge. I'm looking forward to it." That night, lying in bed with Adrian's arm around her, Clara thought about the gunshot that had started this whole journey. That moment in the ballroom when she'd refused to stay silent, refused to accept that powerful men knew better than their own victims. It had cost her everything she'd thought she wanted: social acceptance, easy security, a life without conflict. Instead, it had given her everything she actually needed: purpose, partnership, the power to change things that were wrong. "What are you thinking about?" Adrian murmured, half asleep. "How I'd do it all again. Every choice, every risk, every terrifying moment. Because they all led here. Even the part where you nearly died? Especially that part. It proved I was worth saving, worth fighting for." She turned to face him. "Worth loving. You were always worth loving. I just needed you to believe it too." He kissed her forehead. "Now sleep. We have committee meetings tomorrow, and you know Ruth will have 17 new projects she wants us to consider. 18, actually. I saw the agenda." "Of course you did." But he was smiling. Clara closed her eyes, listening to Adrian's steady breathing, feeling the weight of their shared future stretching ahead. There would be more battles, more failures and victories and compromises that satisfied no one completely. But they would face them together. The woman who'd refused to bow had learned something better than defiance. She'd learned that strength wasn't standing alone. It was choosing who to stand beside. And that the most revolutionary act wasn't challenging power, but transforming it into something that actually served the people it was supposed to protect. Outside, the territory slept. Families in houses that were finally theirs, workers with protections that actually meant something. A system that was learning, slowly, imperfectly, to value people over profit. It wasn't the ending Clara had imagined when she'd first challenged Adrian Blackthorne in front of the territory's elite. It was better, because it wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning. And Clara had finally learned that beginnings, messy and uncertain as they were, held more promise than any perfect conclusion. She fell asleep smiling, her hand clasped in Adrian's, ready for whatever came next. Together.